Chapter 788. Is it a lot? Yijin shook her head. No. I only drank some beer. Drank a little? Li Junxing turned around and looked behind Yijin. What happened? What's wrong? Yijin frowned. She stared at Li Junxing with wide eyes. I want to know too. What's wrong with me? She reached out to hold Li Junxing's shoulder and exhaled a breath of alcohol. Why don't you tell me what's wrong with me? Zhen. Uncle Li, Yijin blinked with a confused expression. Do you like me? There was something wrong with Yijin today. Li Junxing reached out to put his arm around her waist and pulled her into his arms. They had been together for almost 2 months, but this was the first time he had seen Yijin like this. I do. Really? Really? Yijin waved his hand away and took a step back. I don't believe it. Yijin. You definitely don't like me. Yijin shook her head. She had drunk alcohol, and this action made her even more drunk. She blinked and looked at Li Junxing. Uncle Li, you don't like me. Li Junxing's brows were tightly knitted as he watched Yijin pretend to be crazy. He reached out to hold her in his arms and looked into her eyes. I don't like you? Yes. Yijin nodded with a drunk look. Li Junxing narrowed his eyes and reached out to carry her. You're drunk. I'll take you back to the room to rest. Yijin wrapped her hands around his neck and stared into his eyes very seriously. Uncle Li, have you ever lied to me? He didn't answer, so she asked again, Uncle Li, have you ever lied to me? Li Junxing was now sure that the little girl was drunk. No. Really? Yijin blinked, her hands still on his neck. She blinked her misty eyes and looked at him. His heart softened, and he couldn't help but kiss her on the lips. Tell me, what have I lied to you about? With the little girl, he might have used some tricks, but there was definitely no deception. Who knew that Yijin would fall silent after hearing his words? She lowered her head with a dejected expression. Zhen. Yijin struggled a little, trying to get out of his arms. Li Junxing watched as she took a step back, then another. Finally, he sat on the sofa. He bent his knees and reached for the wine again. Li Junxing stopped her from taking the wine. He sat down beside her, lifted her up, and held her in his arms. Yijin looked at him and reached out to grab the wine in his hand. Don't drink anymore. Li Junxing didn't understand what had happened to Yijin, but his intuition told him that it was related to him. What happened? Uncle Li, Yijin buried her face in his chest. She lowered her voice and said helplessly, I lied to you. Seeing that Li Junxing was confused, he held Yijin's shoulder and wanted her to look up, but she refused. Uncle Li, I lied to you. Yijin lowered his head and looked at him. Actually, you should know. When I was with you, it wasn't the first time. Li Junxing was stunned for a moment and suddenly realized something. Zhen, it actually doesn't matter. It does matter. Yijin gritted her teeth. My first time was given to a male prostitute. Male prostitute? Li Junxing's expression became a little subtle. Zhen, I hate that male prostitute so much. Yijin gritted her teeth and said, Uncle Li, do you know? That male prostitute was found by my damned stepsister. She took advantage of the celebration banquet I attended with my colleagues the day before and brought me to the hotel room. Li Junxing actually knew what happened after that. His fingertips twitched, wanting Yijin to forget about it. Yijin suddenly raised her head and looked at him. I drank wine and was unconscious. I only know that I was taken advantage of, and, she didn't finish her sentence. Yijin's eyes were red. Zhen, Yijin's expression became more and more painful and aggrieved. Uncle Li, do you know? Today, my stepsister and stepmother found a lawyer. That lawyer told me, what did she say? Li Junxing looked at her and felt very distressed. He wanted to hold her back in his arms. Yijin's expression was more conflicted and painful than before. She said that she took a nude photo of me that night. Li Juanxing's expression was a little subtle. He looked at Yizhen. Jinjin, actually, Yizhen's expression became more and more pale. She began to cry. Her hands gripped the front of Li Juanxing's shirt tightly, and her body trembled. Yi Ningguan said that she wanted me to transfer 20% of the shares under my name to her. If I didn't agree, she would release my nude photo. Uncle Li, she buried her head in Li Juanxing's arms and burst into tears. What should I do? Li Juanxing narrowed his eyes. Thinking of his previous investigation, his expression didn't look good. He hugged Yizhen tightly and gently patted her back. Don't think too much. She won't. Why not? Yizhen raised her head. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears, and her little face was covered in tears. She looked extremely pitiful. Since she took a photo of me, she will definitely use it to threaten me. Uncle Li, I don't want my photo to be seen by everyone. I don't want to transfer my shares to her either. What should I do? I'm here. A dangerous glint flashed across Li Juanxing's eyes. Damn Yi Ningguan. It seemed that he didn't have time to deal with her before, but she had the chance to come out and mess around. The most important thing now was to solve the matter in front of him. Uncle Li, even you can't do anything, right? Yizhen's face was filled with despair. Uncle Li, tell me, if you were me, what would you do? Would you transfer the shares to her, or would you not transfer the shares to her and let her spread my nude photos all over the world? There's no need for either. Li Juanxing patted her back. Seeing the little girl like this, his heart ached. Do you believe me? I do. Yizhen stopped crying and looked up at Li Juanxing. Uncle Li, how are you going to solve this matter? Li Juanxing pinched her palm and said in a gentle voice, Don't worry, leave it to me. I'll definitely help you solve it. But, you have to tell me what you plan to do, right? Yizhen looked at him pitifully. Uncle Li, before Li Juanxing could say his solution, Yizhen's tears fell again. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Why did I fall for Yi Ningguan's trick that day? If I wasn't careful and more careful, I wouldn't have fallen for it. I was really too careless and stupid. Li Juanxing sighed. Yizhen began a new round of self-loathing. I've actually been trying my best to forget what happened that night, but now I realize that I can't forget it at all. My heart hurts so much, I'm so sad. Uncle Li. Will you feel that I am a woman who has been defiled? Her lips were kissed gently, and Yizhen stared at him with tears in her eyes. Li Juanxing kissed her lips gently. He didn't want her to talk nonsense again. The grievance in Yizhen's eyes almost melted his heart. His heart ached when he heard the self-loathing in her words. How could he watch the little girl continue like this? There was a faint smell of alcohol in her mouth. Together with the smell of alcohol on her body, it made him feel a little drunk. The little girl in front of him was like this, and it undoubtedly made him feel very pitiful and moved. After the kiss ended, Li Juanxing caressed her cheek. Jen, don't talk nonsense. Uncle Li, Yizhen bit her lip and couldn't hide her grievance. I'm not talking nonsense. The person that night was me. Li Juanxing's words made Yizhen's eyes widen. She looked at him in disbelief. For a moment, she thought that there was something wrong with her ears. What did you say? Jen, the person that night was me. No, how could that be? Yizhen was confused. She wanted to find her voice, but found it very difficult. Why? You? How could it be you? It was me. It was me, not a prostitute, so there was no photo. There was no photo of you giving her the shares in exchange for your nude photo. I believe that she didn't have it at all. Really? Yizhen looked like he was in extreme shock. Li Juanxing's heart ached. He kissed her lips, then her cheek, and then her earlobe. Jen, I told you, I won't lie to you. The person that night was indeed me. Yizhen bit her lip and looked at him. She felt as if a fog had enveloped her. Uncle Li? Yes. I'm here. Yizhen lowered her eyes. She lowered her head as if she was digesting Li Junsheng's words. Li Junsheng wasn't in a hurry. He waited for her to digest the news. The little girl in his arms didn't move for a long time. Then, just as Li Junsheng was thinking about how to persuade the little girl, Yizhen finally raised her head. Her eyes were clear and bright. Although there were still traces of tears at the corners of her eyes, she looked extremely sober. Before Li Junsheng could realize what was wrong, Yizhen said lightly, Uncle Li. The person that night was you? Yes. So, you knew about this a long time ago, didn't you? Li Junsheng looked at Yizhen and suddenly realized that he had been tricked. When did the little girl that he thought needed his careful care learn to trick him? Uncle Li, you haven't told me yet. Did you know about it a long time ago? Yizhen looked at him fixedly, and the meaning in her eyes was very clear. She already knew, and he had already admitted it. Lying at this time wouldn't help at all. Li Junsheng cleared his throat. Yes. I knew about it a long time ago. How early is it? This was definitely a suicide question. Li Junsheng pursed his lips into a straight line and didn't answer this question. At this moment, Yizhen moved and changed from sitting on the side to sitting on him. She placed her hands on Li Junsheng's shoulders, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. There was a faint smile on her face. Uncle Li, why didn't you say it? Zhen, I can explain this. Explain. I didn't stop you from explaining. Yizhen was quite kind. Explain. I'm listening. It was too embarrassing. Li Junsheng had a toothache. After living for more than 30 years, this was the first time he had fallen into the hands of a little girl. Yet, this little girl was his sweetheart. Uncle Li, I'm still waiting for you to explain. Yizhen smiled faintly, but the coldness in her eyes was completely different. For the first time in so many years, Li Junsheng felt sweat on his back. It was a little cold. Zhen. Uncle Li, Yizhen's voice changed, and she looked at him with some resentment. Just now, you said that you haven't lied to me. The obvious accusation made Li Junsheng sweat. Zhen. She knew just now, right? After putting on such a show, drinking and complaining tearfully, it turned out that they were waiting for him here? I said, I'm still waiting for you to explain. Li, uncle. Li Junsheng's face was a little dark as he dragged out the last syllable. Looking at the little girl's unforgiving face, he suddenly kissed her lips again. The kiss was so hard that she almost couldn't breathe. Yizhen frowned and opened her mouth to bite him back. How could Li Junsheng let her do as she wished? In this regard, he was an absolute veteran. Soon, he turned the tables and suppressed Yizhen until she had no strength to resist. Yizhen's eyes turned red again. Li Junsheng looked at her and knew that this little girl was pretending and acting. However, he still let go of her. Yizhen, who had regained her freedom, not only did she not retreat, but she also opened her mouth and bit hard on his shoulder. This bite was really heavy and ruthless. Li Junsheng's expression changed. However, she didn't make a sound and let him bite. After biting, Yizhen still didn't feel relieved. She still wanted to bite the other side. At this time, Li Junsheng finally had no choice but to stop her. All right. His little girl was really hot-tempered. Why are you so angry? You mean, you lied to me, but I can't be angry? How could there be such a reason? I'm not lying. Li Junsheng didn't admit it. I just didn't tell you. Yizhen didn't say anything. She looked at Li Junsheng, and the smile in her eyes seemed a little ambiguous. You didn't tell me? I wonder what else Uncle Li didn't tell me other than this? Why don't you tell me now so that I don't have to interrogate you again next time? Even the word interrogation came out, so it was obvious that the little girl was still angry. Li Junsheng grabbed her body. Don't be angry. The person that night was me. Shouldn't you be happy? Did she really want to be a prostitute? Yes, she should be happy. However, she was still unhappy after being lied to by him. Uncle Li Yizhen's expression suddenly turned serious. Can you tell me if you're with me because of what happened that night? Li Junxing didn't expect her to ask this at all. He was stunned. Yizhen was very persistent and insisted on an answer. Uncle Li, you've already lied to me once. Now, please tell me. Are you getting close to me and being with me because of what happened that night? If Ling Xian could find out, it was impossible for Li Junxing to not find out with his status. He found out but didn't say anything. Instead, he was with her. She didn't quite understand his motives and intentions. However, she couldn't believe that what he said was true. What do you think? Li Junxing hadn't recovered from being tricked by the little girl. He didn't answer her question and threw it back at her. Yizhen's face was serious. How would I know? The little girl's words were really asking for a beating. The two of them had been together for more than a day or two. He didn't believe that she didn't know how he treated the little girl. She really deserved to be beaten for asking this question now. However, with his previous experience, Li Junxing didn't dare to really hit her. He could only fiercely kiss Yizhen's lips so that her small and beautiful mouth would not be able to say any more nonsense. Shameless, she used this trick every time. Yizhen wasn't convinced and struggled to bite him. How could Li Junxing let her bite him? He thought of a way to counter her and not give her a chance to bite him. He was in a good mood as he admired the little girl's flushed face. His hand started to be naughty again. When his hand reached into her clothes, Yizhen grabbed his wrist without thinking. Uncle Li, you haven't answered my question yet. What a heartless little girl. Li Junxing lowered his head and bit her lips. I've already made it so obvious. Do you still want to ask? Of course. Yizhen nodded. Chapter 789. Li Junxing didn't care about that. He pinched her palm. He really couldn't do anything to this little girl. You cried like that just now. You really scared me. Don't do that next time. Her acting was so real that it made his heart ache. How could he watch his little girl cry like that? The shyness on Yizhen's face suddenly disappeared. She looked up at Li Junxing. Uncle Li, what I said just now is true. What? My dad found a lawyer and said that my mother was delirious when she made the will and asked for the 20% of the shares to be redistributed. When she said this, Yizhen couldn't hide the mockery in her eyes. Her voice was a little bitter. Anyone would not be in a good mood after being schemed against by their biological father like this. Li Junxing's face darkened. He had already started to make a move on Yizhen's matter recently, but he didn't expect the other party to be so shameless. Uncle Li, my dad, Yizhen didn't know what to say. She definitely didn't believe that this was Yi Nanshan's idea alone. She was afraid that the mother and daughter pair were adding fuel to the fire behind the scenes, causing Yi Nanshan to make such a stupid move. Don't worry about it. Leave this to me. Yizhen shook her head and looked at Li Junxing. She suddenly said, I'm not surprised that my dad would think of a way to deal with me. But I didn't expect him to throw away his last bit of face. He said that my mother is mentally ill. He doesn't even care about my mother's last bit of reputation. She really couldn't take this lying down. If she didn't teach the other party a lesson, if she didn't make Chen Wan and the others pay the price, then where was the heavenly Tao? I even have reason to suspect that my mother's death back then had something to do with my dad. Otherwise, how could a good person disappear just like that? She suddenly turned to look at Li Junxing, her expression full of pleading. Uncle Li, help me. This was the first time she had clearly said these two words to him. In the past, she thought that she could bear it and get through it by herself. However, she didn't expect that the human heart was more sinister than she thought. However, she couldn't wait any longer. Okay. Li Junxing hugged her waist and held her carefully in his arms. Leave everything to me. Don't worry. Yizhen put his face close to his chest and listened to his heartbeat. The insecurity and uncertainty were finally put down. She trusted him. Yizhen knew that nothing could be accomplished overnight. She didn't expect to get rid of Chen Wan and her daughter so quickly. It had been a long time since that incident. Perhaps all the evidence had been destroyed. Even if she wanted to, it wouldn't be that easy. But before that, it was still okay to cause trouble for the mother and daughter. Yizhen requested for a shareholders' meeting. She informed Director Shen, Director Zhang, and Director Jiang in advance. They had all been beaten up by Li Junxing before. In addition, they had other businesses, so they were unwilling to offend Yizhen. Who didn't know that the Li family was powerful? They were an established aristocratic family in Rong City. People like them couldn't afford to offend them. After Yizhen called for a shareholders' meeting, he informed Yi Nanshan. So, when Yi Nanshan received the message, he was already late. Yi Nanshan looked at his daughter. How could he be angry? Yizhen, what right do you have to call a shareholders' meeting without my permission? Didn't I inform you? Yizhen looked as if she had done her duty. Aren't you here now? Yizhen, Yi Nanshan was about to explode. Chen Wan, who came with him, tugged at his sleeve, telling him to endure. Yi Nanshan sat down in his seat and looked at Yizhen coldly. Okay. You asked us to call a shareholders' meeting. Then, I want to ask you, what is it? Since I asked you to call a shareholders' meeting, of course it is. When Yizhen spoke, she smiled and stared at Yi Nanshan coldly. I, Yizhen, hold 20% of the shares of Shogi Company. Now, I want to enter the board of directors and become the chairman of Shogi Company. As soon as she said this, Yi Nanshan and Chen Wan looked at her as if she was an idiot. Yizhen, are you crazy? Yi Nanshan slammed the table and stood up. Do you know what you are saying? I'm not dead yet. Yi Nanshan was furious. He glared at Yizhen as if he was looking at his enemy. You want to be the chairman? Dream on. Whether I'm dreaming or not, I have to do it to know. Yizhen nodded and looked at the anger on Yi Nanshan's face. Dad, do you want me to remind you? If I want to enter the board of directors or become the chairman, I only need a vote from the shareholders. Yi Nanshan laughed angrily. You mean you want to hold a vote now? Don't forget, your shares were obtained through illegal means. Whether it was obtained through illegal means or not, I can't be bothered to talk to you now. If you have the ability, sue me and go to court. When the time comes, I will carry out the court's decision. Up until now, I am just driving. I have the rights of a shareholder. Ridiculous. Yi Nanshan looked at Yizhen coldly. You mean, you think you can become the chairman of Shogi Company? Do you have the ability? Whether I have the ability or not, for now, it depends on everyone's opinion. If Uncle Jiang and Uncle Shen think I have the ability, then it means I do. Yi Nanshan had a bad feeling in his heart. However, he would never admit that he would lose to Yizhen. He sneered. Fine. I want to see if you can get what you want. Want to pull him down from the chairman position? Dream on. Yizhen, I have to remind you that I have 45% of the company's shares. What about you? How much do you have? 20%. Don't you think you can pull me down with your mere 20% of shares? Isn't that ridiculous? Chairman Yi, why are you in such a hurry? Yizhen was not afraid of him at all. It's true that I only have 20%, but there are still Uncle Shen and the others. You can't just listen to your opinion, right? Enough. There's no need to waste time. Yizhen did not even look at Yi Nanshan. Since I called all the shareholders here today, naturally, I have something to ask of you. Yizhen feels that Yi Nanshan is not qualified to be the chairman of Shogi Company. I want to replace the chairman. Yi Nanshan slammed the table and stood up again. Chapter 790. With that, Yi Zhen was the first to raise his hand. Chairman Jiang and the others did not move. Yi Nanshan smiled. He did not believe that these people would be manipulated by Yi Zhen. However, in the next second, Chairman Jiang and the others' actions made Yi Nanshan's expression change. Chairman Jiang, Chairman Zhang, and Chairman Shen raised their hands at the same time. They only looked at Yi Zhen, not daring to meet Yi Nanshan's eyes. Yi Nanshan clutched his chest and looked at these people in disbelief. His chest heaved up and down heavily. He glanced at Chairman Zhang in shock. Old Zhang, Chen Wan's expression was ugly. She did not expect things to turn out this way. Old Shen, Yi Nanshan could barely stand. Chen Wan hurried forward to support him. Nanshan, how are you? Are you okay? As she spoke, she turned to look at Yi Zhen. Yi Zhen, you've gone too far. How could you treat your father like this? I don't have a father like that. Yi Zhen stood there expressionlessly. His eyes were cold. I don't have a father who cheated on my mother when she was sick. I don't have a father who would humiliate his wife in heaven for some shares or property. I don't have a father who is biased and only cares about other women. Father? Heh. He doesn't deserve it. Yi Nanshan was a good father to Yi Jinhao and Yi Ningen, but not to her. You rebellious daughter. Yi Nanshan's voice trembled. You want to be the chairman? In your dreams. Chairman Yi, I suggest that you calm down. Compared to his exasperation, Yi Zhen was much calmer. She looked at Yi Nanshan coldly. You already know the results of the vote. What you've done is indeed unworthy of being the chairman. Everyone's vote was just the right choice. I don't deserve it. Yi Nanshan was furious. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. If I don't deserve it, who does? You? Yi Zhen smiled. She sat down again and looked at the other three shareholders. Uncle Shen, Uncle Jiang, Uncle Zhang, who do you think is suitable? The three shareholders looked at each other. In the end, Director Jiang stood up and looked at Yi Nanshan. His voice was soft and he looked guilty. But when they thought of Yi Zhen's backer, the last trace of guilt disappeared. I suggest that Yi Zhen be the company's chairman. I agree. I agree. Zhang and Shen Erdong followed suit. Yi Zhen raised his hand, a faint smile on his face. I agree even more. Yi Zhen, Yi Zhen acted as if she didn't see his ugly expression. She stood up and looked at Yi Nanshan. Chairman Yi, no, I can't call you that now. Could you please give me your office tomorrow? I need it. Don't go overboard. Chen Wan took a step forward and acted as if she was standing up for her husband. Nanshan is your father. I know, I don't need you to remind me. Yi Zhen's expression was indifferent. Director Yi, that's all I have to say. I hope you can give up your office to me as soon as possible tomorrow. After saying this, she turned to look at the other three shareholders. Uncle Shen, Uncle Jiang, Uncle Zhang, thank you for today. Please believe me. If Jianji Company is in my hands, I will definitely make it better. This is my promise, and please believe that I will do it. There was nothing the three of them didn't believe. She had a strong backer. They had to believe it even if they didn't want to. Yi Zhen, I believe you. Yes, we all believe you. Such a big change caught Yi Nanshan off guard. He didn't expect it at all. He didn't even know what method Yi Zhen used to make the three shareholders stand on her side. Yi Nanshan's face turned green, and his face was full of shock. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't feel comfortable having their power seized by their own daughter so easily, not to mention that he had never liked this daughter. Okay. Yi Zhen smiled and took a step back. She looked at Yi Nanshan's green face. I've said what I wanted to say and done what I wanted to do. Director Yi, see you tomorrow. She walked past Yi Nanshan. When she walked to him, she suddenly stopped. Dad. This was the first time she had called Yi Nanshan Dad since she changed the way she addressed him. She looked at his face. There was a slight coldness in her expression. My mother is gone. Please don't ruin her reputation. I don't care about the shares. I fought with you for the chairman's position because it was left by my mother. You, uncles, all of you know how much my mother has sacrificed for this company. You all know that at least half of my mother's efforts are in this company. Now, she is no longer here. I will protect the property she left behind, no matter what it is. If anyone wants to take it, I can only fight back. Dad, you are such a smart person. I believe you will know what to do, right? Yijin said what she wanted to say in one breath. The moment she turned to leave, she still felt a little sour and bitter in her heart. She believed that her mother's love for this man was real. But now she didn't believe that Yi Nanshan had ever loved Lu Hui. If he had, how could he bear to do that? She closed her eyes and left without hesitation. Yi Nanshan's face turned from green to white. He covered his heart with one hand and supported himself on the edge of the table with the other. Looking at the three shareholders in front of him, his expression was full of anger. Old Shen, Old Zhang, Old Jiang, why did you betray me? Chairman Zhang and the others looked at each other. In the end, Chairman Shen stood up. Nanshan. You're not young anymore. When you're old, you have to admit it. Since young people have the ability, we naturally have to let them do it. Don't you think so? Yi Nanshan's face turned even paler because of this. His hand on his chest kept tightening, and his breathing became rapid. In the end, his eyes rolled back and he fainted. Yijin didn't know that Yi Nanshan fainted after she left. She was in a very good mood. After the initial bit of emotion was put aside, things were much easier after that. Things went smoothly. She successfully pushed Yi Nanshan out of the chairman's position and successfully took it herself. Of course, Li Juanxing's help was indispensable, but so what? Yi Nanshan had even used the trick of slandering her mother for being mentally ill. How could she believe that he wouldn't have a trick up his sleeve? Would he think of a more vicious idea to get her shares? No, she couldn't afford to take that risk. Now, she had a great urge to see Li Juanxing. However, when the car drove to the gate of the city mayor's office, she hesitated. Looking at the solemn gate, she took out her phone and called Li Juanxing. No one picked up the phone the first time, but it was picked up the second time. Jinjin, I'm in a meeting. What's the matter? Huh? Then continue with the meeting. Yijin stuck out her tongue. She felt that she was disturbing Li Juanxing. I'm fine. Just as she was about to hang up, Li Juanxing stopped her. How was it? Did it go well today? It went quite well. Yijin thought about today and felt that it was unbelievably smooth. Thank you, Uncle Li. If it weren't for you, you don't need to thank me. Li Juanxing was taking a 5-minute break in the middle of the meeting. He was about to continue the meeting. Since it went well, you should prepare well. If there's anything you need my help with, just let me know. Okay. Yijin originally wanted to say that she didn't need his help, but now she felt that with someone to rely on, no matter what she did, she was no longer alone. She really didn't know how to feel. By the way, Uncle Li, in order to celebrate my success, how about we go out for dinner tonight? Li Juanxing saw someone waving at him at the end of the corridor. He smiled, and his eyes were filled with gentleness. How about this, we'll celebrate tomorrow. There's a leader from above today. I'm afraid I'll have to accompany him tonight. Tomorrow then. Yijin's face was filled with disappointment. Everything went very smoothly today, and the reason why it went so smoothly was because of Li Juanxing. She had the best news and wanted to share it with him and celebrate it together. However, since he wasn't free, she could only forget about it. Yijin started the car and planned to go back first. Her phone rang at this moment. She looked at the caller ID. It was Ling Xian. An hour later, Yijin saw Ling Xian, who was dressed in leather and looked capable and neat. Xian. After greeting Ling Xian, Yizhen sat down opposite her. Is there any progress on that matter? Yes. Ling Xian nodded and took out her investigation report. Jinjin, I have to tell you that a long time has passed, and it's difficult to obtain evidence. There are many original records. Therefore, it's not easy to find out the truth. I know. When she made up her mind to find out the cause of her mother's death, she thought of all these. Ling Xian nodded and pushed the investigation report in front of Yi Zhen while explaining to her. Jinjin, after you told me that day, I went to the hospital where your mother was hospitalized. In the hospital, I spent a lot of effort and only got this piece of information in front of me. Yi Zhen took it, opened the file bag, and took out the document to read. It was a medical record with many names written on it. She didn't quite understand it. However, there were 2 sentences on it that she could still understand. Stomach cancer and organ failure. Organ failure? She could understand stomach cancer. It could be said that it was her fault. But what about organ failure? Was it a side effect of chemotherapy? She didn't believe it. This, Jinjin. Ling Xian suddenly became very serious. This is what I want to tell you. Organ failure. I asked the relevant experts, and they said that poisoning can also cause organ failure. Yi Zhen's body swayed, and she almost dropped the investigation report in her hand. Chapter 791. Poisoning. What kind of poison? Yi Zhen's eyes widened in disbelief. This wasn't a novel. How could it be poisoning? Are you sure? Her voice was trembling. Jinjin, I'm just telling you my speculation. After all, the symptoms of organ failure for no reason are very similar to being poisoned for a long time. After a long time, it will slowly take effect. Ling Xian's expression didn't look good. She didn't expect such a result. Of course, this is just my guess based on the medical records. In fact, we lack evidence. Her guess was based on Lu Hui's physical condition. No patient with stomach cancer would have symptoms like organ failure when it was only in the middle stage and had not spread to the whole body. This kind of symptom was very similar to poisoning, especially chronic poisoning. Yi Zhen understood that this matter couldn't be solved with just a guess, but in the end, she was still unwilling. Xian, please help me one more time. Of course I will help you. Seeing the medical records, Ling Xian only had her own guess, but she still needed to find out what it was exactly. Yi Zhen sat there, her little face pale, and her fingertips trembled slightly. Looking at it seriously, her eyes were red. It's actually useless. I know. Those who had worked as servants in the Yi family had been fired after Chen Wan and her mother entered the family. Now, the servants in the Yi family were all people hired by Chen Wan. She was too young at that time. Although she could remember who had worked at home, there were so many people. How could she remember them all? Yi Zhen felt as if her heart was being squeezed by a hand, making her so uncomfortable that she couldn't breathe. Jinjin, don't be discouraged. Don't give up. I will help you. Believe me, I will definitely find out. Ling Xian was very determined. Anyone who had heard of such a thing would probably feel that it was unbearable, right? Li Junsheng was very busy these 2 days. Someone from the higher-ups came to check. It was still the economic work. He was in charge of the economic work, and there were many things he needed to do. Although he was very busy, he also paid attention to Yi Zhen's situation from time to time. When he returned home at night, he found that she wasn't in a good mood. She sat on the sofa, hugged her knees with her hands, and revealed a sense of dejection. This feeling was even more distressing than a few days ago when she was drunk and pretended to be crazy to tease him. What's wrong? Didn't the shareholders' meeting go smoothly? Yi Zhen nodded. The shareholders' meeting had indeed gone smoothly, but Yi Zhen didn't know what to say about the ugliness that followed. She reached out to hug Li Junsheng and buried her face in his chest. She had a lot of things she wanted to say, but she couldn't say a word. Some things had already happened, and she was very clear in her heart. Even if Chen Wan was really the murderer and she found the evidence, Lu Hui would not be able to come back to life. What's more, it was very likely that she couldn't find any evidence at all. Thinking of this, she became even more depressed. What happened? Li Junxing gently patted her back and put his other hand on her shoulder. He wanted to turn her body to look at her expression. Yizhen shook her head and buried her face in Li Junxing's chest. Uncle Li, I'm here. Yizhen didn't know what to say, nor did he know how to start. After some thought, she moved away from his embrace and showed Li Junxing the medical record and the examination report on the coffee table. Li Junxing glanced at her and took out the medical record to read. The more he read, the more serious his expression became. Finally, he put down the medical record and looked at the depression in Yizhen's eyes. Your stepmother, there's no evidence. Yizhen looked up at him with a cold expression. Uncle Li, I have no evidence. These are all just guesses. Guesses couldn't become evidence, not to mention that so many years had passed. Li Junxing's brows furrowed. He thought for a moment and thought about the key point of the problem. To poison your mother, it must be someone who is familiar with your mother's routine and your family's situation. So, who do you think is suspicious? I don't know. Yizhen really didn't know. I was too young at that time. No, I wasn't young either. But it's really been too long. That year, I was only 12 years old. I only remember that my mother's health was getting worse and worse. I only remember that I often saw her pale face and weak body. I can't remember more. As for the people who helped my family. At that time, I was too young and didn't know much about my family. I only remember that there were 2 or 3 people who helped in the kitchen. One of them was surnamed Chen, and I called her Auntie Chen. It seemed that she was the one who cooked. But other than Auntie Chen, there were a few other aunties. Some cleaned the house, took care of the courtyard, and some took care of the greenhouse. Speaking of which, everyone was suspicious, and everyone had a chance. Even Yi Nanshan was also involved in this matter. But she didn't dare to think about this outcome. How could she face it? Her father, perhaps the murderer of her mother? She couldn't face it. This was too cruel for her. It was too cruel for Lu Hui. What do you plan to do now? Li Junxing looked at the report. Organ failure. If this was true, then the cause of Lu Hui's death couldn't be as simple as stomach cancer. I don't know. Yizhen shook her head. I've already asked Ling Xian to investigate what happened back then, but I also know that this matter is very difficult. So much time has passed. Maybe I won't be able to find anything in the end. That won't happen. Li Junxing pinched her hand and gave her strength and support. I believe in you. I believe that we can definitely find something. Uncle Li? Yizhen looked up at him, her eyes filled with confusion and doubt. Li Junxing held her shoulder and looked into her eyes. His gaze was firm and his expression was indifferent. Do you believe me? Yizhen bit her lip and finally nodded. If you believe me, leave this matter to me. I'll help you investigate. Uncle Li, but before that, you have to promise me one thing. What? I'll help you find a bodyguard. A woman. From tomorrow onwards, you have to let her follow you. There's no need, right? Yizhen instinctively refused to be followed. Would it be weird if I brought a bodyguard with me? You don't have to treat her as a bodyguard. As Li Junxing spoke, he got up and went to the briefcase at the entrance to take out a document. This is the bodyguard's information. Her surname is Zhao. Her name is Zhao Li. She's the sister of my driver. She's very skilled. Let her follow you in the future. But, no buts. Li Junxing was very serious. You can treat her as a driver or an assistant. Aren't you going to be the chairman of the company tomorrow? Since that's the case, it's not a big deal to have a special assistant. Don't worry, she's very capable, not just good at martial arts. His attitude was really firm. Yi Zhen looked at his expression and really couldn't refuse. In the end, she could only nod. Okay. I promise you. That's right. Li Junsheng had already arranged everything for her. Tomorrow morning, she'll come to pick you up to work. You don't have to drive yourself in the future. With her around, I'll be more at ease. Yi Zhen nodded, but it was quickly replaced by a new round of melancholy. Uncle Li, can you really find out? Why? You don't believe me? Yi Zhen shook her head. I believe you. Although she believed him, she was still a little uncertain. Li Junsheng saw this and sighed heavily in his heart. He hugged her again. You have to learn to believe me, and you have to learn to leave everything to me. With him around, he wouldn't let anyone bully his girl. Yi Zhen smelled the very pleasant and clear scent on his body, and her heart slowly relaxed. She was unprepared. The worst had already happened. Why would she be afraid of worse? The next day, Yi Zhen saw Zhao Li. She was dressed in a black suit. She had short hair and wasn't particularly beautiful. Her facial features looked good separately, but when combined, they looked very ordinary. However, there was an advantage to such looks. If she was thrown into a crowd, she wouldn't attract attention. Hello, Miss Yi. Zhao Li, right? Hello. Miss Yi, from today onwards, I'll be following you. Sorry for the trouble. Yi Zhen wasn't used to having a bodyguard following her, but Li Junsheng was so worried. She didn't want to brush off his good intentions. In fact, Li Junsheng's existence made her feel very at ease and stable. At such a time, someone was by her side, firmly on her side, and supported her in any decision. She felt that fate was very strange. Yi Ningen wanted to harm her, but she had a night of fun with Li Junsheng by chance. She was so angry at first, but now she felt very sweet. This kind of feeling was really very subtle. Thinking of Li Junsheng, she couldn't help but smile and feel happy. Liking someone was like this. Thinking of him made her feel happy and happy. However, Yi Zhen's happiness only lasted until she entered the company. Yesterday, she announced the personnel order at the company. Before work yesterday, the internal documents had been sent to the entire company. From today onwards, their chairman was no longer Yi Nanshan, but her, Yi Zhen. After entering the company, the people from the planning and marketing departments stood up to support her. Needless to say, Manager Gu from the planning department used to be her boss, but he took care of her a lot. The manager of the marketing department was promoted by Lu Hui as an exception. All these years, she had been working hard in the company and still missed Lu Hui. So after receiving the notice, she went downstairs. Looking at these two managers, Yi Zhen was very grateful to them. At such a time, it was already very rare for them to stand on her side. She knew. Thank you. Yi Zhen nodded at the two managers and was about to go to the chairman's office when the marketing manager took a step forward. Chairman Yi, that what? Yi Zhen looked at him, not understanding why he was blocking her way. It's like this, Miss Yi is here. She's upstairs. The marketing manager looked troubled and seemed a little worried. She's in the chairman's office now. Really? I got it. She was not afraid of Yi Ningen. She was not afraid before, and now she was even less afraid. Chairman Yi. Gu Mingxiu had worked with Yi Zhen for more than a year, so he had some understanding of her personality. Miss Yi is not here with good intentions. Be careful. It's okay. Yi Zhen glanced at Zhao Li behind her and gave her a look. Zhao Li nodded gently. Although it was the first time they met, they had a good understanding of each other. Yi Zhen felt more relaxed and went upstairs. Before entering the chairman's office, she saw Yi Nanshan's former secretary, Chu Tei, coming over. Chu Tei was almost 40 years old this year. She had been with Yi Nanshan for many years. She had been with Yi Nanshan before Lu Hui passed away. They all knew what happened yesterday. Seeing Yi Zhen coming up, Chu Tei quickly came to greet her. Chairman Yi, Miss Yi, I got it. Yi Zhen looked at Chu Tei. Not bad. She came to report so early and changed the way she addressed her. She was a clear person. Inform everyone that there will be a meeting in half an hour. All the deputy managers are required to attend. Yes. Chu Tei nodded and left. Yi Zhen seemed to have thought of something and added, tell those managers that if they don't attend, I'll assume that they don't want to work anymore. They can go to the finance department in the afternoon to settle their salaries and leave. Yes. Chu Tei lowered her head, unable to hide the shock in her eyes. Yi Zhen had been in the company for many years and had always kept a low profile. Now, it seemed that he was just lying low. Chu Tei went to inform the meeting. Yi Zhen brought Zhao Li into Yi Nanshan's chairman's office. There, Yi Ningen was sitting in Yi Nanshan's original seat. When she saw Yi Zhen enter, her expression was very fierce, as if she wanted to eat Yi Zhen alive. Yi Zhen, UB*TCH, how dare you come here? Seeing Yi Zhen enter, Yi Ningen stood up and raised her voice. You made Dad so angry that he was hospitalized, and you still have the face to show up. If I were you, I would hide at home. How dare I come out and embarrass myself? Yi Zhen touched her ear as if she had heard something unpleasant. She turned around and looked at Zhao Li. A dog entered the chairman's office. Inform the security and get this dog out. Yi Ningen walked quickly around the desk and walked in front of Yi Zhen. UB*TCH, who are you calling a dog? The one who answered is the dog. Yi Zhen looked at her finger that was almost poking the bridge of his nose and gently waved it away. Also, the other one is AB*TCH. Speaking of which, in this world, I really haven't seen anyone more B*TCHY than you and your mother. What did you say? Yi Ningen's face turned green. Say that again? It's the same even if I say it 100 times. Yi Zhen was not afraid of her. She sneered. Did I say something wrong? Your mother is a mistress, and you, the daughter of a mistress, shamelessly want to seize things that originally didn't belong to you. If this isn't B*TCH, then what is? Yi Zhen, I'll kill you. She rushed in Yi Zhen's direction and raised her hand as if she was going to slap Yi Zhen. However, before she could touch Yi Zhen, Zhao Li, who was behind Yi Zhen, moved a few steps. Before Yi Ningen's hand could touch him, he easily grabbed and pulled, restraining her hands behind her back. Yi Ningen could not move. She kept twisting her body while glaring at Yi Zhen hatefully. Chapter 792. Retribution. Yi Zhen narrowed his eyes and walked to Yi Ningen step by step. A person like you dares to talk about retribution in front of me? Let me tell you, if there is retribution in this world, it will only happen to you and your mother. Her expression was cold and her gaze sharp. For a moment, Yi Ningen's momentum was actually seized by her. Yi Ningen's fear only lasted for a moment. She quickly regained her composure and said, don't be complacent. Do you think you can sit in the position of chairman? In your dreams. I'm telling you, you won't get away with this. You can't compare to Daddy at all. Just wait to be pulled down by others. Alright, we can give it a try. Am I going to be pulled down, or am I going to sit firmly in this position and watch your father, you and your mother lose everything? Who doesn't know how to talk tough? Yi Zhen didn't think that he would lose if he talked tough. Yi Ningen's chest heaved violently. She looked at the arrogance on Yi Zhen's face and felt very angry. Lose everything? Who do you think you are? Why? Because I'm the chairman of Jianghui Company. The security guards came up at this time. Yi Zhen waved his hand, and 2 security guards stepped forward to take Yi Ningen downstairs. Yi Ningen kept struggling and refused to admit defeat like this. Yi Zhen, you bitch. You will die a horrible death. What right do you have to chase me away? Let me tell you, I also have a share in the company. I'm also Dad's daughter. The 2 security guards wanted to drag Yi Ningen again, but Yi Zhen stopped them at this time. She walked in front of Yiningen. Her incomparably beautiful face was filled with coldness at this moment. She just stared at Yiningen with a cold gaze. What did you say? Yiningen looked at her as if she had suddenly found her weakness. She sneered, What? Are you afraid? Afraid? Why should I be afraid? Because I'm also Dad's daughter. I'm telling you. Because I'm also Dad's daughter, I naturally have half of the company's assets. Yijin didn't speak. She looked at Yiningen with a dangerous look. Are you my father's daughter? Yes. Can't I? Yiningen seemed to have finally made a comeback. She smiled quite proudly. Let me tell you, Yijin, why are you still yelling here? Be careful, or I'll get a lawyer. If that happens, you won't even be able to keep the shares you have now. She suddenly exclaimed with a smug look on her face, speaking of which, you'll lose your shares sooner or later. After all, your shares were obtained through improper means. The smugness in her eyes was really dazzling. Yijin sneered and took a step forward. She got close to Yiningen's ear and spoke in a voice that only the two of them could hear. You want to be my father's daughter? Your mother used to be a prostitute on West Street. Who knows how many men she slept with? You don't even know which man's bastard you are. Do you really think you're the daughter of Yi family just because you followed your mother into Yi family? Ridiculous. Yijin's words made Yiningen feel like a golden pheasant who had been stabbed in the foot. She suddenly flared up, screaming and rushing to Yijin. Yijin waved his hand and looked at the two security guards, who quickly took Yiningen away. And along the way, Yiningen was screaming and struggling. It was not until her voice disappeared in the elevator at the chairman's office was completely quiet. Zhao Li had been looking at Yijin. Now it was quiet. She stepped forward and said, Do you want me to go downstairs and make her stop talking? No need. Yijin had never put Yiningen in her eyes, but she had never known what she had just said. But what if what Yiningen said was true? Was she really Yinanshan's daughter? Yijin soon realized that some things might never be as she thought. After thinking about it, she took out her mobile phone and made 2 calls. After putting down the phone, Yijin fell into deep thought. Could Yiningen really be Yinanshan's daughter? Yiningen was only 1 year younger than her. If what she said was true, it meant that Yinanshan had betrayed his mother a long time ago. Thinking of the possible cause of Lu Hui's death and Yinanshan's betrayal, Yijin really felt sorry for Lu Hui. Yijin didn't have much time to think about this matter. The first manager's meeting after she took office was about to begin. This was her first battle in the company. No matter what, she couldn't lose this battle. She called Chu Tai to be the recorder and brought Zhao Li into the meeting room as a special assistant. She didn't know if Chu Tai's threat just now worked. There were a lot of people in the meeting room, and it was full. In addition to the managers, many deputy managers were also here. When everyone was here, Yijin could also carry out her plan. Today, I called you here only to say one thing. From today on, I will be the chairman of the company. I will lead everyone to bring the company to a new height. Before that, I hope you can be loyal to the company. You work for the salary, and you want to get more. Only when the company is good will you be good. However, if anyone has disloyalty, betrays the company, or does something wrong to the company, then don't blame me for not being polite. A few simple words, using both the carrot and the stick, also showed her attitude. Those who could sit here weren't stupid, so they naturally understood what she meant. However, many people were still in a wait-and-see state. Yijin knew that, so she had to completely win the hearts of the company before Yinanshan seized the opportunity to make a comeback. Yijin began to become busy. Previously, she had made a few phone calls, causing everyone to be unwilling to cooperate with the shogi company. Now that Yijin made a call, she first brought up the cooperation case with Ninghai Company. President Ning had been waiting for this moment, so he would naturally give Yijin face. With President Ning as the start, the previous partners all resumed their cooperation with the shogi company. Yizhen became very busy all the time. She had just taken over the company. In order to not give Yi Nanshan an excuse to pick on her, she could only work harder. Li Junxing had been very busy recently. There was a working group from above to inspect, and he was also in charge of several projects that were related to the people's livelihood in the city. He was busy, and so was Yizhen. After Li Junxing was done with his work for the past few days, it was Friday. He finally had some free time. He suddenly remembered that he and Yizhen had been leaving early and returning late. Li Junxing frowned. When he was about to go home, he asked the driver to drive to Yizhen's company. Yizhen had just taken over as the chairman a few days ago, so she was very busy. When she received Li Junxing's call, she hadn't reacted yet. Uncle Li? Yes. I'm downstairs at your company. Come down. Yizhen looked at the time. It was already past the time to get off work. It was just that she had been like this during this period of time. Every day, she worked overtime until very late. Sometimes, when it was too late, she would choose to sleep in the small lounge attached to the company. I still have documents in my hands that I haven't finished reading. Zhen. Li Junxing suddenly turned serious and called her name in a very gentle voice. If you don't come down, I can only go up to look for you. He had such a beautiful voice, but he had to say such threatening words. Yizhen looked at the time and thought about how she had been reading documents day and night these past few days. She had been looking at the previous data and the information of those customers who weren't working with her. Okay, wait a moment. I'll come down right away. When Yizhen went downstairs, she looked around to make sure that no one had noticed her before getting into the car. This action naturally aroused Li Junxing's dissatisfaction. As soon as she got into the car, he brought her body into his arms. What? Am I that shameful? No, I didn't mean that. You didn't mean that? You're acting like a thief. I really didn't. Yizhen shook her head and tried to change the topic. By the way, what are we eating tonight? Don't change the topic. Li Junxing wouldn't be fooled by her. It doesn't matter what we eat tonight. But tell me first, what did you do wrong these past few days? Me? Did I do something wrong? Yizhen didn't understand. She thought about it seriously, but she couldn't figure it out. In the end, she shook her head. I don't know. As soon as she finished speaking, Li Junxing bit her lips gently. It wasn't heavy, but it was a little painful. Yizhen bit her lips. You can't figure it out? Li Junxing pretended to continue biting her. Then I'll have to come again. Yizhen was bitten again, and her eyes were a little red. Uncle Li, with her like this, how could Li Junxing bear to make things difficult for her? You. He hugged her waist tightly and rested his chin on the top of her hair. I know you just took over the company. There are many things. But first, don't be too tired. Second, I want you to know that I'm your man. Shouldn't you give me more care? Yizhen blinked. For a moment, she almost thought that there was something wrong with her ears. Uncle Li, so, was he complaining that she didn't spend more time with him? If you keep looking at me like this, I won't care where this is and will do you directly. Uncle Li, Yizhen was afraid that he would really do something rash, so she took a big step back. However, Li Junxing pulled her back into his arms. He looked at her with a faint smile. What do you want to eat? Everything is fine. Yizhen nodded. Just as she was about to say whatever, her phone rang. She looked at Ling Xian's number displayed on it and hurriedly picked up the phone. Xian. Jinjin, I've helped you find out what you wanted me to find out. Ling Xian's voice was a little solemn. Where are you now? I'll come to find you. Yizhen looked at Li Junxing, who was sitting next to her, and shook her head. Where are you? I'll come to find you. Okay, I'm still at the company. I'll wait for you. Okay. After hanging up the phone, Yizhen looked at Li Junxing. Uncle Li, I'm afraid I can't have dinner with you today. Li Junxing didn't say anything and just stared at her face. Yi Zhen was a little embarrassed. She didn't intend to let people know about their relationship so soon. Especially relatives and friends. Uncle Li, I'll get out of the car first. Before she could move, her waist was already in Li Junxing's arms again. He looked down at her fair face, and his voice was soft but firm. Are you going to see your friend now? Yes. I'll go with you. Uncle Li, Yi Zhen bit her lip, and there was a hint of difficulty in her eyes. Li Junxing suddenly narrowed his eyes. He looked at Yi Zhen and suddenly realized something. Chapter 793. Yi Zhen didn't say anything. She looked at Li Junxing and felt that he would be angry. Her lips moved. For the first time, she didn't dare to look into Li Junxing's eyes. Uncle Li, my friend is looking for me for something very important and private, so, very private? Li Junxing heard a sentence just now. She said that the matter you asked her to investigate has come to light. What did you ask her to investigate for you? What do you have that you can't let me know? He thought that she had no secrets about what had happened before she passed by in front of him. Uncle Li, or, in your heart, you don't treat me as your boyfriend at all? I don't. Yi Zhen didn't know what else she could say. It wasn't that she felt that Li Junxing was shameful, but Ling Xian knew that the person that night was Li Junxing. Now, she suddenly wanted to bring Li Junxing to Ling Xian. Since you don't, I'll go with you. Uncle Li? Address. For the first time, Yi Zhen knew that Li Junxing could have such a strong side when he was stubborn. Her lips moved. She didn't want to say the address. Li Junxing asked Xiao Zhao to stop the car and pull over to the side of the road. Li Junxing just looked at her face. Address? Uncle Li. I'm just going. I'll be back soon. Yi Zhen. Li Junxing looked at the troubled expression on her face. Either I go with you today, or you don't have to go today. This was a multiple-choice question. Yi Zhen sat motionless. The atmosphere in the car was a little stiff. Li Junxing didn't have to go, but Yi Zhen's attitude made him a little uncomfortable. During this period of time, he had become patient and went first. However, he didn't understand why Yi Zhen was always afraid to appear in front of others with him. Was he really that shameful? Yi Zhen bit her lip. Before she could think about it, Li Junxing suddenly sighed. Forget it. Making things difficult for you is making things difficult for myself. What's the point? Get out of the car. As he spoke, he glanced outside. Zhao Li has already driven the car over. Let her send you there. His attitude changed so quickly that even Yi Zhen was surprised. Uncle Li, Li Junxing held her waist and kissed her on the lips. He said in a helpless and doting tone, You've already called me uncle. How can I argue with a niece like you? Yi Zhen's face suddenly turned red. She lowered her head in embarrassment. When he said the word niece, she couldn't help but think of the times when they were intimate. He also liked to play this kind of prank. My dear niece, are you happy that uncle is doing this? Don't you like to call me uncle? If you call me a few more times, I'll have more energy to feed you. Blushing, Yi Zhen realized that he could still think like this at this time. Go. She knew that he was more than 10 years older than she was, so his behavior was naturally much more mature than hers. In the few months that they had been together, he had often been like this, going along with her and taking care of her. No matter what she did, he never seemed to get angry. Was this the difference between a mature man and her? Yi Zhen bit her lip and suddenly said as if she was going all out, Actually, it's not impossible. If Uncle Li wants to go, then let's go together. Li Junxing looked at her with a gentle gaze. Don't force yourself. You know, I never like to force you. I'm not forcing you. She was just not used to it. She had a good relationship with Ling Xian, like sisters. There was nothing wrong with bringing Li Junxing to her. Li Junxing looked like he was considerate of her. Really don't force yourself. I can give you time until you're willing to introduce me to others. Li Junxing let go of her with a magnanimous expression, but there was also a hint of disappointment hidden in his magnanimity. Since it was an equal relationship, it was naturally sincere for sincerity. He was honest with her. He took her to see his parents and friends. But if she still held back from him, it would be too much. Yizhen blamed herself more and more. Ever since they met, it seemed that he had always given in for her and thought more. It's okay. I really won't force myself. As if afraid that he wouldn't believe her, she took the initiative to hug his waist as she spoke. She told him the address. Li Junxing hugged her with his hands. At an angle that she couldn't see, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. How could there be disappointment in his eyes? There was only joy. He lowered his head and kissed the top of the little girl's hair. It was better to put such an innocent little girl in his arms and protect her well. Ling Xian was shocked when she saw Li Junxing appear with Yizhen. Especially when she saw Li Junxing's face in the surveillance camera, she was even more shocked. She couldn't help but look at Yizhen. Xian, let me introduce you. This is my boyfriend. Li Junxing. Uncle Li, this is my good friend, Ling Xian. Hello. Li Junxing was the first to reach out and greet Ling Xian. Ling Xian looked at his face and couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. Finally, her gaze fell on Yizhen's face. What did you call him? Before Yizhen could think of how to answer, Li Junxing answered on her behalf very considerately, the title isn't important. This is just a little fun between us as a couple. The words, a little fun between a couple, almost made Yizhen choke on her saliva. She couldn't help but turn to look at Li Junxing. How could he say such nonsense? It wasn't like that at all. The awkwardness on her side hadn't subsided yet. Ling Xian seemed to have just reacted and let out a loud, ah. Yizhen and Li Junxing were shocked by her cry at the same time. Li Junxing. Ling Xian came from the Ling family, so she naturally couldn't be stupid. She almost immediately realized the other party's identity. Are you that Li Junxing? Yes. Li Junxing smiled. If there are no accidents, I'm probably the only Li Junxing in Qing City. Oh my god. Ling Xian couldn't help but stare at Yizhen again. Did she have to be so lucky? She casually slept with a man, and she slept with a mayor? The corners of Yizhen's mouth twitched, and her smile was a little bitter. There were some things that she really didn't know how to say. Xian, didn't you say that you have some clues about the matter I asked you to investigate? Ling Xian restrained her expression because of her words and suddenly became serious. Yes. I found something, and I can show it to you. Yizhen and Li Junxing walked to the sofa beside her office and sat down. Ling Xian handed the information in her hand to her. Yizhen took it and opened the information. She wasn't in a hurry to read it. Instead, she turned around and glanced at Li Junxing. His expression was a little too calm. Thinking of what he said just now, Yizhen didn't want to hide it from him anymore. She directly took out the information and started reading. With this, she realized that things were really interesting. Speaking of which, Yi Nanshan was not wrongly accused by his grandfather of being a poor boy from the countryside. He wasn't born in the countryside, but he was similar to the countryside. He came from a small county in Z province. Ever since he was young, his grades had been considered outstanding. Yi Nanshan had been conceited since he was young, not only because of his good grades, but also because he was good-looking. Without a good appearance, how could he have attracted Lu Hui's attention back then? Later, he came to Qing City to study and entered Qing City University. There, he met Lu Hui. If it was just a simple acquaintance, there would naturally be no problem. However, Yi Nanshan and Lu Hui's acquaintance was probably premeditated. Yi Nanshan knew a girl from next door in his hometown. That girl was none other than Chen Wan. When Yi Nanshan was with Lu Hui, he wasn't with Chen Wan. However, he could guess what happened later. He took a fancy to the benefits that Lu Hui represented and what kind of benefits would be produced by marrying Lu Hui. His good looks had successfully attracted Lu Hui's attention. In this way, he and Lu Hui's relationship would be smooth sailing. After getting together with Lu Hui, Yi Nanshan would pretend at first, but later, he wasn't even willing to pretend anymore. In front of Lu Hui and the Lu family, he was naturally a good gentleman. However, in a place where Lu Hui and the Lu family couldn't see, he picked up Chen Wan. Not only did he pick her up, but he also found her a house alone for her to live in. Yi Nanshan was in love with Lu Hui, but at the same time, he was with Chen Wan. Later, he and Lu Hui were going to get married. For some reason, Chen Wan didn't want to stay and wanted to leave. Because of this, the two of them separated for a period of time. Later, when Yi Nanshan and Lu Hui were officially married for less than 3 years, Chen Wan came to Yi Nanshan again. The two of them didn't know what was going on, but naturally, they rolled together again. This time, it wasn't just once or twice. Yi Nanshan's moves were not new. He helped Chen Wan settle down. To prevent Lu Hui from finding out, he arranged for Chen Wan to stay far away from the Lu family's villa on the other side of the city. In this way, even if he had to spend half a day to see Chen Wan, he was willing. After all, only by being far away would he not be found out. Later, Lu Hui got pregnant and had Yizhen. When she first got pregnant, because Lu Hui's pregnancy wasn't good, the Lu family was very concerned. Yi Nanshan was afraid of being found out, so he didn't dare to act rashly. Therefore, he rarely went to see Chen Wan. Instead, he began to focus all his attention on Lu Hui. That was the time when he and Lu Hui were at their best. However, it was also at that time that Chen Wan found out she was pregnant. She was scared and desperately called him, asking him to appear. Therefore, there was what happened later. Yi Nanshan couldn't let Chen Wan abort the child. Therefore, while comforting Chen Wan, he also had to prevent Lu Hui from finding out. Fortunately, because of Yizhen's birth, Chen Wan focused all her attention on the child. Because Yi Nanshan had a chance to breathe. He asked Chen Wan to give birth to the child. Chen Wan didn't know what to think, but she finally agreed. Then, she gave birth to Yi Ningen. However, no one knew what happened after that. Chen Wan left Yi Nanshan alone. Yi Nanshan looked for her for a long time. The reason why she left was not shown, so Yizhen had no way of knowing. Chapter 794. Yizhen looked at the information and forced herself to continue reading. Chen Wan was kept by Yi Nanshan and later gave birth to a daughter, Yi Ningen. Looking at Yi Ningen's birth date that was less than half a year apart from hers, Yizhen felt extremely mocked. She really pitied Lu Hui, really pitiful. Now it seemed that Yi Nanshan didn't have any true feelings for Lu Hui. He was clearly using her from the beginning to the end. He came from an ordinary background and got resources. He used Lu Hui to get promoted and get resources. He opened a company and improved his status. Hate, really hate. Yizhen gritted his teeth and endured the hatred in his heart as he continued reading. She didn't know what happened in the meantime, but for a period of time, Yi Nanshan stopped contacting Chen Wan. Maybe it was because he was afraid of being discovered by Lu Hui, or maybe it was for other reasons. Yizhen looked at the information and realized that there was a period of time when Yi Nanshan was running for Qingqing's top 10 entrepreneurs. No wonder. Yizhen thought of Lu Hui and felt a burst of heartache. Mom, you gave up everything for this man. You thought you got true love, but you didn't know that the other party was using you from the beginning to the end. He was deceiving you. There was no sincerity at all. But you hurt your heart and even lost your life for such a man. Yizhen clenched the thin pieces of paper and felt a pain in her heart. Her palms suddenly warmed up. Her hand was held by someone. She turned her face and found that Li Junsheng was holding her hand. The way he looked at her was very gentle. Yizhen's heart warmed and she had an inexplicable urge to cry. She originally only had a few doubts, but now because of this information, her doubts rose to 10. If Yinanshan's feelings were fake from the beginning, then could he be a suspect in Lu Hui's death? The paper in her hand was taken away by Li Junsheng, and he finished reading the rest of the investigation. He looked up and met Ling Xian's gaze. This is the information you investigated? Yes. Ling Xian felt a little pressured now. She didn't expect Yizhen to find such a powerful man. He was actually the new mayor of Qingcheng. Li Junsheng nodded. Do you have a backup? Huh. Yes. Send a copy to my email. After Li Junsheng said that, he picked up a pen and paper and wrote down the email address. Yizhen didn't know what he was going to do, but Ling Xian obediently sent the backup investigation information to Li Junsheng. Li Junsheng took out his phone to receive it and forwarded it. At the same time, he sent a message. Putting down his phone, he met the sadness in Yizhen's eyes and squeezed her hand. All right, don't think too much. Leave the rest to me. Yizhen fell silent. Leave it to him? What could he do? Lu Hui was no longer there. She was dead, and no matter what they did, she would never come back to life. Believe me, I will definitely seek justice for your mother. Yizhen looked at Li Junsheng. There was sadness in her eyes, but now was not the time for her to be sad. She really had a lot of things to do. Ling Xian did not speak. This was the first time she had seen her friend like this. Are these two serious? Yizhen thanked Ling Xian and left. She got into Li Junsheng's car again. Her mood was still very low. What do you want to eat tonight? Li Junsheng squeezed her palm and pulled her into his arms. He really didn't like to see the little girl so depressed. She should smile more. Her facial features were bright, but she didn't smile much. Yizhen shook her head and said, whatever. Why is it always whatever? Li Junsheng kissed her lips gently. Why don't we eat hot pot? It's starting to get a little cold. Hot pot is the best. Okay. Yizhen wasn't very interested. What she wanted to do the most now was to find out the cause of Lu Hui's death and avenge Lu Hui. Only then could she be worthy of Lu Hui's spirit in heaven. Zhenzhen. Yes? Don't think too much. Li Junsheng kissed her lips gently and made her look at him. Everything will work out when it comes to it. You have to believe me. Yizhen nodded. At this time, Li Junsheng was like a driftwood to her. Other than trusting him, she didn't know what else she could do. On one end, Yizhen was still waiting for the results of Li Junsheng's investigation. On the other end, Yinanshan's lawyer came to the door again. He wanted Yizhen to hand over the shares, saying that he had doubts about the will. She wasn't qualified to inherit Lu Hui's shares. Yizhen ignored him, but lawyer Ding said that if she didn't come out to solve the problem, it would be up to the judge to decide how to award the shares and who to award them to. Whatever. Yizhen put down the document in her hand. After learning that her mother's matter might be related to Yinanshan, the little bit of father-daughter affection she had for Yinanshan disappeared without a trace. You can go and sue, or you can let the court decide, but please also tell Yinanshan. The heavenly Tao is clear, and retribution is not good. I'm waiting to see the retribution of their family of 4. Lawyer Ding failed to communicate with Yizhen, so he had to leave first. However, before Yizhen was about to go home that day, she was blocked by Yiningen. She didn't enter the company, but blocked the company's parking lot, next to her car. Speaking of which, Yiningen used to work in the company. However, the first thing Yizhen did after becoming the chairman was to fire Yiningen. It didn't make sense that she couldn't even be the planning team leader before, but Yiningen still had a position in the company. Yizhen and Zhaoli were about to walk to their cars when Yiningen appeared. Yizhen, don't go too far. I'm warning you, if you don't want to embarrass yourself, hand over the shares and return the company to Dad. Otherwise, you'll suffer. What a joke. Yi Zhen looked at this person and really didn't know who Yi Ningen looked like. Without Yi Nanshan and Chen Wan's scheming, even her IQ wasn't online. I don't know how I'll lose face holding my own things. Yi Ningen had a look of disdain. What? Have you forgotten what you said today? You asked Dad to sue you. Don't you want to go to court with Dad? I don't understand. What good will it do you if you go to court? I don't believe that Li Juanxing's family will allow a disobedient and unfilial person to go to court with her own father. Whether they will or not is the Li family's business. It has nothing to do with you. If you have the time, why don't you go back and accompany Yi Nanshan? Enjoy your rare leisure time. Yi Zhen, you're really the most shameless person I've ever seen. You don't even call me Dad. I'll definitely tell Dad about this. Tell Dad? Whatever. She didn't care at all. Yi Zhen didn't want to argue with Yi Ningen. That was boring at all. He walked past Yi Ningen and was about to leave when he saw Yi Ningen suddenly smile. Okay, Yi Zhen, if you don't give the shares to Dad and don't let him be the chairman of the company again. Just you wait. I want to see. Will you still be able to smile in a few days? Her smile was strange, and her words were even more strange. Yi Zhen didn't want to pay attention to her. He got into the car, but he couldn't help but start to think about the meaning of Yi Ningen's words. What did they prepare? Yi Zhen soon found out, because Yi Nanshan really did sue her. Yi Nanshan submitted a petition to the Qing City Court, saying that when Lu Hui died, she was unconscious, so the will didn't count. Not only that, Yi Nanshan even took out a new will. The date of the will was before the later will. The content of this will said that Lu Hui knew that she didn't have much time left, so she gave all the shares in her hands to Yi Nanshan to inherit. And Yi Zhen only had some real estate and funds under his name. As soon as this will was written, Yi Zhen received a subpoena from the court. When Li Junxing returned home, he saw the subpoena on the coffee table. Yi Zhen sat on the sofa, a little lost in thought. Picking up the subpoena and glancing at it, Li Junxing sat down beside Yi Zhen and patted the back of her hand. Don't worry. There's already some progress in the matter you asked someone to investigate. It's just a few days. I'll get someone to investigate as soon as possible. Really? What did you find out? A nanny who worked in the Yi family back then. She said that she once saw the chef working in the kitchen put something in your mother's tea. Really? Yi Zhen suddenly became excited. She looked at Li Junxing with an anxious expression. Where's that chef? Did you find him? Not yet. Li Junxing looked at Yi Zhen, not wanting to disappoint her. But don't worry. I've already sent someone to look for him. It just needs time. Yi Zhen's expression was a little depressed. She looked at Li Junxing. It's been so long. How did that nanny know? Also, who's that nanny? The nanny's surname is Wang. How did I know? It's because I asked someone to investigate all the people who worked in the Yi family over the years. Because your mother was in charge of the Yi family back then, your mother managed the family very well, but the servant salaries were all paid by the housekeeper, so the nanny couldn't remember how many people there were back then. However, the chef usually had a good relationship with her, so she remembered. According to the records, she found the nanny who worked in the Yi family back then. The nanny didn't know that after so many years, there were still people investigating what happened back then, so when she found out that the chef had put something in Lu Hui's tea, she asked. In the end, the chef said that she had seen wrongly. Because she had a good relationship with the chef, she believed the other party's explanation. Now, Li Junxing had already asked for the chef's name, but the country was so big. It was a little difficult to find someone who only had a name. Fortunately, we already have a direction. Jinjin, don't worry. There should be a response in a few days. Yi Zhen nodded. She knew that it had been too long. It would be difficult to find all the evidence in a short time. But this was already very good news. At least this proved that her mother's death was really not because of stomach cancer, but because of someone else. Then what about this? Chapter 795. If she really had to return the shares to Yi Nanshan, she would definitely vomit to death. When Yijin thought of this, she felt uncomfortable. There's no need. Li Junxing smiled and pinched her palm. Don't worry. I have a way. The will in his hands can't be real. I also believe it's not real, but I'm afraid that there's a chance. Even if it's real, as long as you feel suspicious, you can refuse to execute it. The transfer of shares requires the signature of the person in question. If you don't agree, it's useless even if he has the will. But, no buts. Li Junxing didn't want her to worry too much. Do you know? Now that the shares are under your name, even if the court rules that the will is invalid after the hearing, it won't be able to enforce it. Even if it is, it can be delayed for a long time before it is implemented. And before that, I believe I've found the evidence. There were many people with the same name in the country, but it wasn't difficult to find a chef. Thank you, Uncle Li, she had asked Ling Xian to investigate for so long without any results, but Li Junxing had made such an important progress. Li Junxing put the subpoena aside and looked at the gratitude in Yijin's eyes. He reached out and pinched her palm. Your gratitude isn't very sincere. His fingertips gently brushed past her palm, and she felt an itch. She wanted to take her hand back, but he wrapped his entire body in his arms. His hand slowly slid down her back. These two simple actions caused Yijin's legs to go weak. Uncle Li, if you really want to thank me, why don't you call me hubby? There was a warm touch on her lips. He kissed her lips, bit by bit. He traced the shape of her lips. His low voice was filled with endless sexiness. Be good, call me that. Yijin's face turned slightly red. Looking at the teasing look in Li Junxing's eyes, she suddenly raised her hand and hooked it around his neck. Her red lips were slightly seductive. She half bit her lips and leaned close to his ear. Her fragrant breath, accompanied by her hot breath, brushed past his ear. Hubby, thank you. Li Junxing felt his throat tighten and pulled Yijin's body into his arms. Say it again. Hubby. Yijin pressed her forehead against his, and her slender fingertips gently stroked his lips. Thank you. How about this thank you gift? He lowered his head and kissed her lips forcefully. You're really a demon. You asked for it. Yijin lost his strength, his body like dough. He had pinched her here and there, and she was no longer the same as before. Yijin signed the document and handed it to Chu Te. Over the past few days, she had observed the people in the chairman's office. Yi Nanshan's former assistant was Yi Nanshan's man, and he didn't trust her. That day, the assistant didn't come to the meeting. Yijin wasn't interested in asking what the assistant was doing. He directly asked someone to give him his salary and then let him go. On the other hand, Chu Te and the other secretaries in the secretary's office followed her wholeheartedly. Their relationship was pretty good. It was also because of Chu Te's help these past few days that her work had progressed very smoothly. Of course, Yijin wasn't afraid even if one or two of them had evil thoughts. It would take time to subdue Yi Nanshan's former subordinates. What she had now was time. In the past few days, Yi Nanshan didn't appear even once. Not only Yi Nanshan, but Chen Wan and Yi Ningen also didn't enter the company again. Yijin couldn't figure out what they wanted to do with this almost laissez-faire state. She suspected that Yi Nanshan had a backup plan waiting for her, but she wasn't afraid. Soon, it was the day before the trial. Yijin returned home early and looked at Ling Xian and the information that Li Junxing had prepared for her. In fact, the information was very one-sided. Just like how Yi Nanshan had provided that Lu Hui was mentally ill back then, the information couldn't be used as evidence. She just hoped that it would be helpful when she went to court. After reading all the information, Yijin's heart wasn't at ease. She wanted to drink, but she was afraid that if she got drunk, she wouldn't be able to go to court tomorrow. She could only walk back and forth in the living room. When Li Junxing returned home, he saw Yijin like this. What's wrong? Nothing. Yijin saw that he had returned and turned to walk towards him. Why are you back so early today? During this period of time, she knew that there were a few big moves in the city. Li Junsheng was very busy. However, no matter how busy he was, he would try his best to go home early at night. Unless it was a special occasion or a meeting that he couldn't postpone, he would always come back to have dinner with her. Li Junsheng didn't answer her question. He looked at the information on the coffee table. Are you very nervous? Yes. Do you need me to greet you and Director Sun? Director Sun was the director of the Qing City Court. Ever since Yijin got involved in this lawsuit, Li Junsheng hadn't looked for him. No. Yijin looked at Li Junsheng with an unusually serious expression. Uncle Li, don't look for Director Sun, and don't look for anyone related to your profession. She was not an ignorant little girl. She knew when to stop. Uncle Li, don't let it affect your work. She gently stroked his front lapel. She was very grateful that he had such intentions, but there were many things. Not only did she want to rely on herself, but she also didn't want to cause trouble for him. I know people. I'm on the rise of my career. Uncle Li, I don't want to make things difficult for you because of me. Even if it would have a slight impact. The seriousness in Yijin's eyes moved Li Junsheng a little. It's not difficult. It's just a phone call. No need. Yijin shook her head with a firm expression. I want to win against him fair and square. She said it very easily. It was hard to hide the nervousness in her eyes. Li Junsheng's heart ached a little. There was no need for her to experience these things. He lowered his head and kissed her lips gently. It wasn't appropriate to accompany her to court. After all, he was too big a target. However, it was okay to use his way to make her less nervous. Sure enough, after being kissed and hugged by him, the nervousness in Yijin's heart dissipated a lot. Uncle Li, she gave him a warm response and let herself indulge in this almost indulgent happiness. As for other troubles, she would think about them later. Yi Nanshan sat in the plaintiff's seat. Yi Ningen and Chen Wan, who were in the audience, attended with him. Yijin sat expressionlessly in the defendant's seat. She never thought that one day, she would go against her biological father in court. The trial soon began. Yi Nanshan had Lu Hui's medical records from back then. There was also the will. However, Yijin had another will in her hands. More importantly, she also had the medical records from back then. The doctor's statement was completely different from the medical records provided by Yi Nanshan. Yi Nanshan's lawyer was Lawyer Ding. He seized all the loopholes and led the matter to the side that was disadvantageous to Yijin. However, the lawyer Yijin hired was also very famous. It was Li Junsheng who had recommended him to her. This person had some connections with Tang Mohan's family. His surname was also Tang, and his methods and abilities were top-notch. His tongue was like a lotus flower. No matter what trick Lawyer Ding threw at him, he could smoothly take it. Lawyer Ding repeatedly emphasized that Lu Hui had a mental problem at that time. Lawyer Tang's side was not inferior. He directly threw out the hospital's diagnosis. He said that Lu Hui only had stomach cancer, not mental illness. Lawyer Ding retorted and said that Lu Hui was depressed because she had stomach cancer, which was why she might have a mental problem. Hearing this, Yijin was so angry that she almost laughed. She looked at Lawyer Ding and wanted to refute. Lawyer Tang gave her a look that told her to calm down. Before Ms. Lu Hui died, she was still negotiating the next cooperation project for the company. I want to know how a person with a mental problem could have such ability. Now the other party's lawyer is saying that Ms. Lu Hui has a mental problem? I think you're the one with a mental problem. Objection to the other party's lawyer's personal attack. Objection sustained. Lawyer for the plaintiff, please watch your attitude. We only look at the evidence. All our evidence shows that Ms. Lu Hui had no intention of giving the shares to Ms. Yijin when she was alive. We all know that the last will is guided by the last will. The will in our hands is the last one made by Ms. Lu Zhen. The two sides were going back and forth, and it was very lively. For a moment, it was a stalemate. In the end, Lawyer Ding and Yi Nanshan didn't get any advantage, so they asked the judge for a temporary adjournment. Yi Zhen agreed. After a 10-minute adjournment, she followed Lawyer Tang out of the courtroom and whispered the results. On their side, they had done their best. With the evidence in their hands and the information they had, although they couldn't make things clear immediately, they definitely wouldn't lose. On the other side, Yi Nanshan and Lawyer Ding also walked out and whispered something outside. This was the first time Yi Zhen had seen Yi Nanshan after the shareholders' meeting that day. He had lost some weight, but he looked quite energetic. His eyes were full of dissatisfaction and anger when he looked at her. Yi Zhen didn't care at all. Because of Yi Nanshan's gaze, she thought of another point. She suddenly smiled, turned to look at Lawyer Tang, and whispered what she had just thought. Chen Wan and Yi Ningen walked out and went to Yi Nanshan together. Yi Zhen, on the other hand, suddenly relaxed. She had full confidence. Before the court reopened, Yi Zhen received a call from Li Junxing. He asked her how the trial was going. Was there anything she could help with? Standing in the corridor, she listened to Li Junxing's voice. Yi Zhen felt that all her worries and fears had become insignificant. No need. Uncle Li, don't worry. I'll definitely win. Okay. Li Junxing smiled. Then I'll wait for you to win and go home. I'll celebrate for you. Okay, wait for me. After hanging up the phone, Yi Zhen felt as if her entire body had been replenished with spiritual power and was full of vitality. As for Yi Nanshan and the others, she didn't care about them at all. The trial continued. Lawyer Ding provided a new piece of evidence to prove that Lu Hui had a mental problem. In addition to the medicine she took, there was also the confession of a nanny in the villa. The nanny said that before Lu Hui died, she was often moody. She would either laugh or cry. There were a few times when she lost her temper at the servants in the villa. After she lost her temper, she regretted and blamed herself. She looked crazy. Yi Zhen sat in the dock and looked at Lawyer Ding, who was full of nonsense. She really had the urge to pull out his tongue. Suppressing her anger, she suddenly stood up after Lawyer Ding finished speaking. She looked at the judge in the court. Her eyes were clear, but her expression was faintly cold. Your Honor, I have a few questions to ask the plaintiff. Is that okay? Yes. Ask. Yi Zhen bowed and turned to face Yi Nanshan. Mr. Yi, I want to ask you something. Do you love Ms. Lu Hui? Yi Nanshan's expression changed and he didn't answer this question. Lawyer Ding stood up. Your Honor, this question has nothing to do with our trial. My client can refuse to answer. Your Honor, my question is definitely related to the trial and the evidence I'm going to present later. I sincerely ask the plaintiff to answer my question. Yi Nanshan looked at Yi Zhen. He didn't quite understand why she was asking this question, but he still gave an affirmative answer. Of course I love your mother. Since you loved my mother, how could you bear to accuse her of having a mental disorder after she passed away? What do you know? It's a fact that your mother is insane. Yi Zhen, don't talk nonsense just because you're unwilling to return the shares to me. Fine, I'm talking nonsense. Then, Mr. Yi, you said you love my mother. How could you cheat on my mother not long after you married her? Yi Zhen, what nonsense are you talking about? Yi Nanshan's expression changed, and his expression was stained with coldness. Yi Zhen smiled. Your Honor, Mr. Yi keeps saying that he loves my mother, Ms. Lu Hui. But in fact, not long after he married my mother, he cheated on her and betrayed her. Under such circumstances, I don't think he loves my mother. Since he doesn't love my mother, how could my mother give him all the shares? That's impossible. Do you have evidence that Yi Nanshan cheated? The judge asked. Yi Zhen nodded. Of course I have evidence. She glanced at Lawyer Tang. Lawyer Tang took out a document at the right time. We have a DNA report. The report shows that Miss Yi Linghan, who is sitting in the audience right now, and Mr. Yi Nanshan are father and daughter. In other words, Mr. Yi Nanshan cheated on Ms. Lu Hui at the beginning of their marriage. Objection. Defendant. This kind of emotional issue has nothing to do with today's trial. Lawyer Ding stood up. His face suddenly had a trace of anxiety. Yi Zhen looked him in the eye, and his voice was unyielding. Lawyer Ding. Mr. Yi. I want to talk about the issue. It happens to be related to today's trial. Chapter 796. Hearing this, Yi Nanshan couldn't sit still. Chen Wan and Yi Ningen, who were in the audience, all turned pale. Yi Nanshan stood up and pointed at Yi Zhen. Yi Zhen, what nonsense are you talking about? The will clearly stated that your mother wanted to give all her assets to me, not to a little girl like you. Mr. Yi, are you saying that my mother was not only blind, but also fell in love with you, the man who betrayed her? Is she stupid enough to give her assets to a man who almost killed her because of an affair? Yi Zhen said this and turned to face the court. Your Honor, I strongly request that the will of that year be re-examined. I have reason to suspect that with my mother's personality, she would never give her assets to a man who hurt her and betrayed her. This was simply the turning point of the day. Your Honor, what the other party said is not true. Yi Nanshan's face turned green. Things had developed beyond his expectations. He didn't expect that Yi Zhen would use Yi Ningen's identity to make a fuss. Not true? Yi Zhen chuckled. His face was filled with ridicule, but he didn't back down in the slightest. Mr. Yi, you and Madame Chen Wan had Yi Ningen while you were still married to my mother. Does that count as cheating? You and Chen Wan gave birth to Yi Jianhao less than half a year after my mother passed away. Does that count as a second affair? At that time, you already had another family. You even had a son and a daughter. What makes you think that with my mother's personality, she wouldn't know anything and even give you half of the assets? Is she stupid? The series of questions made Yi Nanshan's face turn green. He pointed at Yi Zhen for a long time, but he couldn't say a word. Yi Zhen turned to the judge. Your Honor, the facts of today's matter are clear. I sincerely hope that the court can find out the facts and make the right judgment. His words were powerful and powerful. Yi Zhen stood in the court. No one could match his beauty at that moment. On the plaintiff's stand, Yi Nanshan's face was as black as ink. He looked at Yi Zhen with resentment. The court decided that there was insufficient evidence and Yi Nanshan's request was not supported. Yi Zhen knew that she would win, but she had been holding her breath. Now that she got the result, she saw Yi Nanshan's face turn from black to white. She chuckled, thanked Lawyer Tang, and quickly left the court. Outside, Yi Nanshan's family of 3 stood there with Lawyer Ding. Their faces didn't look good. Seeing her come out, Yi Nanshan didn't move, but Yi Ningen rushed over first. Yi Zhen, how can you be so cruel? Daddy is also your daddy. How can you be so vicious? Yi Zhen paused and looked at Yi Ningen from top to bottom. In terms of viciousness, I really can't compare to you. Yi Zhen looked at Yi Nanshan coldly and said, I didn't take something that wasn't mine. Yi Zhen, you rebellious bitch. Yi Nanshan took 2 steps forward, but Yi Zhen interrupted him before he could finish. Rebellious daughter? If I'm an unfilial daughter, then what are you, Dad? You, Mom hasn't even died yet, and you've already had a baby with another woman. I really want to know, does Mom know about your affair? I believe that if he knew, he might not have given you the remaining shares of Jianji Company. Yi Zhen. Chen Wan couldn't help but put on the airs of a mother. You're just a child. What nonsense are you talking about? No matter what, your father is still your elder. How can you talk to your father like that? Yi Zhen didn't respond. She stared straight at Chen Wan, acting like a good person, and sneered. Suddenly, her expression changed, and her gloomy face darkened. Her gloomy eyes swept over the three people present. Finally, her gaze fell on Chen Wan's face. "Auntie, I'm actually quite curious. After so many years, have you never had nightmares at night? My mother never came to see you at night? Have you ever dreamed of my mother in the middle of the night?" What nonsense are you talking about?" Chen Wan's face paled. "How could I dream of your mother?" "No." The corners of Yizhen's lips curled up slightly. Her smile had a hidden meaning. "It's good that you didn't. After all, if you don't do anything shameful, you won't be afraid of ghosts knocking at your door in the middle of the night." "Yizhen. What do you mean?" Yi Inghan jumped out. She couldn't stand seeing Yizhen like this. "Nothing." Yizhen flipped her hair and pushed it to the back of her head. "I was just saying." Chen Wan's expression changed slightly. She was a little surprised. Yi Nanshan couldn't stand Yizhen's strange behavior. "Yizhen, what are you trying to say? Have you caused enough trouble? Now that you've achieved your goal, what else do you want?" "Dad, you're so strange. You were the one who caused trouble first. Now that you're saying this, it's meaningless. He was the one who wanted to sue her for the shares. He was the one who used all means to kick her out of the company. How did it become her making trouble?" Yizhen wasn't interested in staying any longer. Her gaze fell on Yi Nanshan's face. Looking at his pale face, she wasn't sure if they knew about what happened in the past. But it didn't matter. Her counterattack was just about to begin. Yizhen left the court and got into the car. She asked Zhao Li to go to the mayor's office. She knew that Li Junxing was at work, but she couldn't help but want to tell him the good news personally. However, before she could make the call, she saw Li Junxing coming out of the mayor's office building. He didn't necessarily wear a suit when he went to work, but even if he didn't, he would still wear a more formal business shirt. A dark business shirt might look a little old-fashioned to others, but he didn't wear it. However, he wasn't dressed like that. He was more elegant and had the demeanor of a business elite. At this moment, the buttons on his shirt sleeves were unbuttoned, revealing his strong elbows. His expression was very serious, as if something had happened. Behind him were his driver, Xiao Zhao, and Secretary Chen. Yizhen stopped in her tracks. Li Junxing was about to get into the car, but he accidentally saw Yizhen's car. He turned around and walked towards the car. He knocked on the car door. Yizhen rolled down the car window, revealing her exquisite little face. "Why are you here?" The seriousness on Li Junxing's face disappeared, and his eyes seemed to be stained with gentleness. "I won." Yizhen's words made Li Junxing understand what had happened. He reached out and squeezed her hand on the car window. He always liked to do this. "Really? Congratulations." "Thank you." As Yizhen spoke, she looked behind him. "Are you going out?" Li Junxing nodded, and his expression became serious again. "There was an explosion at a chemical plant in the West District. I just received news. I'm going to take a look now." Yizhen suddenly became nervous. "How is it? Are you okay?" "I'm not sure." Li Junxing looked behind him. In just a short while, many officials came out. "You go back first. I probably won't be home so soon today." Yizhen nodded. She could tell the severity of the matter, but she said, "Uncle Li, be careful. There should be a fire or something at the place of the explosion. Don't get too close." "Silly girl." Li Junxing rubbed her hair and didn't say anything else. He turned around and walked towards his car without looking back. Yizhen looked at his figure and ignored the gazes of others. Looking at Li Junxing's back, she suddenly felt that he was very tall and straight. Moreover, he was indestructible. Yizhen soon saw the news of the explosion. It was caused by the improper operation of the staff at the chemical plant. Fortunately, it was during the shift change, but more than a dozen people still died. This was a major accident. She could see that other than Li Junsheng, some familiar faces that she often saw on TV appeared at the scene of the explosion. Li Junsheng had more scenes. She didn't know if it was because he was handsome and young. His expression was very solemn. Yizhen saw that his sleeves were rolled up high, and his hair was no longer as smooth as before. However, the camera quickly moved away again. Yizhen couldn't see him. She wanted to call him, but she didn't want to cause trouble for him, so she could only give up. That day, Li Junsheng didn't come back at night. The next day, Yizhen woke up early and turned on the television to watch the news. The explosion yesterday was still being reported, but the scene about Li Junsheng only flashed by. She sighed in her heart and took out her phone to call Ling Xian. Before Li Junsheng went to busy himself, she had some things to deal with. In order not to give Yi Nanshan a chance to react, Yizhen decided to strike first. After communicating with Lawyer Tang, she decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. Didn't you say that there was a problem with the will back then? I also think there was a problem with the will back then. You've already cheated, and my mother still wants to give you the shares? Give you the property? Are you stupid? It's already polite not to let you leave the family with nothing. Since that's the case, what reason is there for you to continue being smug? Therefore, Yizhen pointed at the lawsuit and sued Yi Nanshan. A daughter suing her father. She was the first in the entire Qing city. Lawyer Tang analyzed the case for her very seriously and told her the possible outcome. Yizhen didn't care. What was reputation? Could it be eaten? She really couldn't take this lying down. She really wanted to vent her anger for Lu Hui. Of course, the most important thing was that if she caused trouble for Yi Nanshan in the open, they wouldn't have the time to destroy the evidence from back then. They wouldn't have thought that her real goal wasn't the shares that had already fallen into Yi Nanshan's hands. She wanted to find evidence that Chen Wan had killed Lu Hui. However, she didn't need to tell Lawyer Tang this. Lawyer Tang, don't worry. I'm not a person who pesters people endlessly. However, I can't just let go of my mother's grievances for so many years. Just think of it as me wanting to vent my mother's anger. I understand. Don't worry, Miss Yi. I will definitely try my best to win this lawsuit. Thank you. It didn't matter whether she won or not. If she found the evidence and sent Shen Wan and Yi Nanshan to prison, she would have achieved her goal. After communicating with Lawyer Tang, she handed the information in her hands to Lawyer Tang in as much detail as possible and dealt with some urgent official business in the company. She was busy until almost 1 in the afternoon. When Yi Zhen was about to have lunch, she remembered that she didn't know how Li Junsheng was. She called Li Junsheng, and the person who answered the phone was Secretary Chen. He said that Li Junsheng was now in the hospital, not in the factory. Yi Zhen couldn't sit still anymore. Uncle Li is in the hospital? What happened to him? Is he okay? Yizhen didn't notice that her knuckles were a little white. Secretary Chen seemed to be very noisy, so Yizhen didn't hear it clearly. She vaguely heard a hospital. She hung up the phone without hesitation and rushed out. If Zhao Li hadn't moved quickly, she would have left him behind. Sitting in the car, Yizhen felt a little guilty. She shouldn't have listened to Li Junsheng and not gone to the scene to see him. Now it was great. She still remembered the explosion in Tianjin City clearly. There must have been a few small explosions after that. The fire spread and injured many firefighters. Li Junsheng was at the scene. What if he encountered such a thing? The more anxious she was, the more she wanted the car to arrive immediately. But today, for some reason, the road was blocked. Lu Zhishuan's call came at this time. Jinjin. Uncle? What's the matter? I heard that your father is suing you, saying that there's a problem with your mother's will. When Yi Nanshan sued her, she didn't want her grandfather and uncle to worry, so she didn't tell them about it. She didn't even have a public hearing, but her uncle still found out. Yes, but it's fine now. She briefly explained the matter and comforted her uncle that she was fine. Your father, that bastard. Lu Zhishuan didn't care at all that it was inappropriate to say that about Yi Nanshan in front of Lu Zhen. I shouldn't have let my sister marry him in the first place. He's really an ingrate. Yizhen didn't say anything. Wasn't that right? Decades of feelings were all used in the end. Jinjin, don't be anxious. Uncle will help you with this matter. It's okay, Uncle. Yizhen had already made up her mind. Uncle, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Before she found the evidence, she didn't even intend to say that there was something fishy about Lu Hui's death. Why should Lu Zhishuan and the others worry? Jinjin, take some time to go home. Your grandfather and I have something for you. Okay. Yizhen didn't know what her grandfather and uncle had for her. However, she hadn't seen her grandfather and uncle for a while. After hanging up the phone, Yizhen's anxiety didn't lessen at all. Thinking that something might have happened to Li Junxing, she really couldn't sit still for a minute. When was it? Would Li Junxing have such a place in her heart? She used to think that she was alone, but she didn't expect that she would meet someone like Li Junxing. He was clearly in a high position, but he didn't put on any airs. He had a handsome face, but he never seemed to attract peach blossoms. The more Yizhen thought about it, the more worried she became. Finally, there was no traffic jam ahead, and she arrived at the first hospital smoothly. There seemed to be a lot of people in the first hospital today. Yizhen called Secretary Chen as she walked inside. She didn't know how Li Junxing was injured, and her heart was extremely anxious. When the call finally went through, she heard her phone ringing beside her hand. She was very familiar with the ringtone. She turned around and found that Li Junxing was sitting on the bench in the corridor. He was holding his phone in one hand, and his other hand was wrapped in bandages. His clothes were no longer as neat as they were yesterday. There were some bloodstains and stains on them. A few strands of his hair were disobediently falling in front of his forehead. Just looking at it like that, she didn't know how badly he was injured. Yizhen quickly ran over and held his hand before Li Junxing picked up the phone. Uncle Li, are you okay? Li Junxing didn't expect Yizhen to come over. He was stunned for a moment. How did you know I was here? Yizhen shook her head and didn't answer his question. Instead, she looked at his hand. Her eyes were a little red, and there were faint tears in them. Uncle Li, it's a small injury. As Li Junxing spoke, he glared at Secretary Chen, who wasn't far behind her. Secretary Chen shrank his head and didn't dare to answer. There were people coming and going in the corridor, and the two of them were equally outstanding. Naturally, they attracted a lot of attention. Secretary Chen, who discovered this, took a step forward. Mayor Li, there are a lot of people here. Look, I'll go back first. Get someone to guard here. Remember, call me as soon as possible if anything happens. Li Junxing's hand was injured, and Secretary Chen also wanted him to go back and rest quickly. Now that the situation at the factory had basically stabilized, Li Junxing could also take a breather. Holding Yizhen's hand, Li Junxing followed her out of the hospital and got into Yizhen's car. Along the way, many people saw Li Junxing and felt that he looked familiar. However, because his current image wasn't good, they didn't think of the mayor on TV. As soon as she got into the car, Yizhen held Li Junxing's injured hand. Uncle Li, how's your hand injury? Is it serious? Other than your hand, where else are you injured? It's fine, it's just a small injury. Li Junxing raised his uninjured hand and held hers. Don't worry, I'm fine. How can you be fine? Yizhen didn't believe him at all. She looked at the blood stains on her body. Where else are you injured? Don't try to hide it from me. Li Junxing reached out and hugged her tightly in his arms. His chin pressed against her collarbone, and his voice was very soft. Don't worry, I haven't married you yet. Of course, I won't let anything happen to me. He was still glib-tongued at a time like this. Yizhen gently pushed him and looked at Zhao Li in front of her. Her car didn't have a glass partition in the middle, and she was too embarrassed to let Zhao Li see them being intimate. Li Junxing seemed to know what she was worried about. He didn't take any further action and calmly explained the injury on his hand. Yesterday, the factory exploded. More than a dozen people died, and dozens were injured. The fire in the factory was still burning, and the firefighters had already gone to put out the fire. He commanded at the scene and asked them to arrange and treat the injured as soon as possible. However, he didn't expect there to be a second explosion. At that time, Li Junxing happened to be consoling an author. Although he was already prepared when he heard the sound, his hand was still injured by the sparks that flew over. It's not very serious. It's just a small piece of skin. Xiao Chen was too nervous and insisted that I go to the hospital to bandage it. He said that he had been inside for an entire night, so he should go back and rest first. That's good too. Go home and sleep for a while. If there's anything else, we can talk about it after you rest. Yi Zhen looked at the dark bruises under his eyes and felt a little heartache. Uncle Li, don't go there again. It's impossible not to go. This matter was so big that the internet was in an uproar. They still had a lot of things to deal with, so Li Junxing could only rest for the time being. When she returned home, Yi Zhen hurriedly ran to the bathroom. At this time, she was glad that she came out after putting it in. Li Junxing was taking off his clothes with one hand. When she saw this, she quickly went forward. Let me help you. It was fine if his hand wasn't injured, but he had to pay special attention to his injured hand. Yi Zhen carefully took off his clothes. Looking at the red stains on the bandage, she felt her heart ache again. Uncle Li, does your hand hurt? Li Junxing looked at her and suddenly smiled. Why don't you kiss me? Maybe after you kiss me, it won't hurt anymore. This person was still not serious at a time like this. Yi Zhen bit her lip, but F took the initiative to tiptoe and kiss his lips. She tasted the taste of tobacco in his mouth. She was stunned for a moment. The slight taste of mint smoke surprised her. She only smelled blood just now, but she didn't notice that there was also the smell of tobacco on his body. But even so, Yi Zhen still felt that Li Junxing was very charming. She imitated him and kissed him deeply. Her hands climbed up his neck, but she was careful not to touch his wound. And because of her passion, he gave her a deeper kiss. After the kiss ended, Yi Zhen's legs felt a little weak. She placed her hands on his chest. She looked at him gently and worriedly. You smoked? Yes. After not sleeping for a night, he was very sleepy. He smoked too to refresh himself. Is the matter this time very troublesome? It's all right. It would be a little troublesome. He had only been in office for a few months, and such a thing had happened. He would have to deal with the aftermath, explain to the people, and explain to the higher-ups. He would probably be very busy for the time being. Don't smoke next time. Yi Zhen looked at him. Uncle Li, you told me last time that everything will work out when it comes to it. So, I think you don't have to worry too much. Everything will be fine. I know. Although he said that, such a thing happened during his term of office, and it was due to his lack of supervision. Li Junxing didn't intend to tell her too much. If he said too much, it would only make her worry. After entering the bathroom, Li Junxing, who was about to take a shower, blinked when he saw the bathtub full of bathwater. He turned around and called out to Yi Zhen. What's wrong? Yi Zhen ran quickly. Is your wound hurting again? Uncle Li, other than your hand, where are you injured? I'm fine. Li Junxing stood there, looking a little troubled. It's just that my hand is injured, so it's not convenient for me to take a shower. I'll help you. Yi Zhen spoke quickly. Li Junxing looked at her with a flash of a smile in his eyes. Yi Zhen was good in everything else, but she was too shy in some aspects. For example, if she was asked to change places or try some new positions, she would be shy for a long time. Such an opportunity today was really rare. Li Junxing staggered and almost couldn't stand. Let me help you in. Yijin didn't think at all. Li Junxing's hand was injured, not his foot. Okay. Li Junxing was helped into the bathtub by Yijin. Yijin carefully raised his injured hand and placed it on the edge of the bathtub. Be careful. Don't get it wet. Li Junxing didn't say anything and watched as she eagerly brought a towel to bathe him. He looked at the worry on her face. Chapter 797. Li Junxing sat in the bathtub and looked at Yijin. There was a hint of a hidden smile in his eyes. His little girl might not have noticed it, but her attitude towards him had changed a lot compared to the beginning. His little girl hadn't noticed this change, but he had. Uncle Li, next time you encounter something like this, don't rush to the front. Okay. Actually, it's none of your business. There are so many people, Yijin couldn't continue. This thought was actually a little selfish. When she was still a commoner, she would have hoped that their official would have done more for her. But one day, when she became the family of these officials, she only hoped that they would be safe. That fire was not a joke. What if there was something, okay? After Yijin finished complaining, she took the bath towel and was about to bathe Li Junxing. However, at this moment, she suddenly realized a problem and stopped her movements. Li Junxing watched as her face turned red bit by bit. Seeing that she stood there motionless, he pretended to be puzzled and asked, "What's wrong?" Uncle Li, Yijin handed the bath towel to Li Junxing with a slightly red face. You only have one hand injured. You can do it yourself. But, I'm afraid of touching the wound. Yijin gritted her teeth. The water was very clear. She could see at a glance that in the water, she retracted her gaze. She was still in the mood to be distracted at a time like this. Uncle Li, you can bathe yourself. Okay. Li Junxing didn't object. He took the bath towel, but his hands suddenly loosened. The wet bath towel fell onto his injured arm. Pfft, Li Junxing took a deep breath. Yijin's expression changed. Uncle Li, are you okay? I'm fine. Li Junxing said with a weak expression, maybe it's because I didn't sleep last night. I'm a little tired. I'm fine. He reached out to get the bath towel again, but Yijin was one step faster. She looked at the wet bandage and felt her face turn pale. The bandage is wet. What should I do? Why don't I send you back to see a doctor? Or should I call a doctor over? No, it should be fine. Just help me bandage it later. But, I'm so tired. Li Junxing's face looked weaker and weaker. I want to take a shower and have a good sleep. Then let me help you. How could Yijin dare to let him make a move? She took the towel and began to bathe Li Junxing. Her face was full of worry, so she didn't see the flash of joy and the smile of success in Li Junxing's eyes. Washing his upper body was fine. Although Yijin's movements were a little clumsy, he still managed to wash his body smoothly. However, when he washed his lower body, he felt a little awkward. She stared at Li Junxing's body underwater, her face burning. Uncle Li, it's fine. Go ahead and wash yourself. I just want to sleep. Yijin gritted his teeth, not daring to hesitate any longer. He closed his eyes and reached into the water. By the time Yijin finished bathing Li Junxing and came out of the bathroom, her hands were sore. Looking at the refreshed and energetic Li Junxing, no matter how slow she was, she realized that something was wrong. Uncle Li, you. Was he pretending just now? You're tired, aren't you? Li Junxing looked at her and smiled gently. I'm sorry. The main thing is that I can't control myself when you bathe me like that. It's been hard on you. Yijin wasn't as thick-skinned as him. She couldn't say that as if it was as normal as eating. She gritted her teeth and glared at him. You still said that your wound hurts. Because he was injured and the wound hurt, he had to trouble her to help him with his hands. But shouldn't the wound hurt and rest? Yes. Li Junxing nodded and looked at his wet bandage. Look, it's all wet. Help me bandage it again. Yi Zhen, who had been tricked, didn't want to talk to him at all. Looking at the wound, she could only helplessly get the medicine box. When she removed the bandage on Li Juanxing's hand, her caution turned into worry. How did you get so badly hurt? There was a large burn mark, and the red muscles inside made her feel uncomfortable. She bit her lip, and the corners of her eyes reddened uncontrollably. It's fine. I already said it's a small injury. As long as you're not angry with me, it's fine. Yi Zhen glared at him and didn't say anything else. She picked up the medicine prescribed by the doctor and applied it to his wound again. Then, she carefully bandaged his wound. After the wound was bandaged, Yi Zhen took the medicine box and was about to return to the living room. Don't go. Sleep with me for a while. You're already injured like this, and you're still thinking about that. It's just sleeping. What are you thinking about? Li Juanxing couldn't help but laugh. Besides, didn't you help me solve it just now? You're still talking about it. Then I won't say it. It's made of. Yi Zhen couldn't help but glare at him again. In the end, she couldn't bear to reject him. She followed him to the bed and lay down to rest. The two of them lay down together. In the end, Yi Zhen couldn't help but fall asleep. When she woke up again, it was already afternoon. Looking at Li Juanxing, who was still sleeping, she got up quietly and quietly walked to the living room outside. When Li Juanxing woke up, he saw Yi Zhen cooking in the kitchen. She was wearing an apron, and her shoulder-length black hair was tied into a small braid at the back of her head. The light of dusk shone in from the kitchen. She looked so beautiful that it was a little unreal. When Yi Zhen took out the dishes, her waist was hugged. She didn't turn around. Instead, she gently patted the back of that hand. Okay, there's one more dish. We can eat when it's done. Li Juanxing didn't let go. He buried his face in Yi Zhen's neck. His breath was warm, accompanied by his pleasant and clear voice. Jinjin, you smell so good. Yi Zhen's hands paused. How do I smell good? You smell like oil. My whole body smells good. Li Juanxing hugged Yi Zhen's waist with his uninjured hand. At this moment, his expression looked extremely sincere. Do you want me to prove it to you? Yi Zhen took his hand away and looked at him warily. No need. Go out. I still have to cook. You can cook later. Li Juanxing was addicted to teasing her. He took a step forward and hugged her again. I'm very hungry now, but I want to eat you more. Li Juanxing. That was enough. His hand was already injured. Wasn't he going to stop? Yes, this is the first time you've called me by my full name. Li Juanxing looked at her sideways. I think it would be better if you removed the word Li. Mayor Li, Mr. Li, have you had enough? Yi Zhen gently pushed him. Do you want me to finish the rest of the dishes? Not enough. Li Juanxing kissed her face. You only used your hand just now. It doesn't count. You really don't want to consider doing it in the kitchen again? Li Juanxing smiled and finally decided not to tease her. Okay. You cook. I'll go out, okay? Yi Zhen heaved a sigh of relief. Li Juanxing turned around and left, but at this moment, he deliberately took a step back and blew gently in her ear. Sooner or later, I'll give you the kitchen. Yi Zhen gritted her teeth as she watched Li Juanxing walk out as if nothing had happened. Was this person really the mayor of a city? How could he be so, the latter adjective was too shameful. Yi Zhen shook her head and forced herself to focus on cooking and not think about anything else. When Yi Zhen brought the dishes to the table, she found that Li Juanxing was on the phone. He had his back to her and was standing near the balcony. Those people can't wait any longer. I don't believe that they won't use this matter to make a fuss. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Okay. I'll have to trouble you to help me investigate the matter last time. As for the current matter, don't worry. I can handle it. Don't worry. Although I came a little late, I'm not a pushover that anyone can pinch. Okay. Hearing the voice behind him, Li Junxing hung up the phone. Yijin didn't hear everything, but her eyes were filled with worry again. Uncle Li, will this matter be very troublesome? No matter how unfamiliar she was with the officialdom, she knew that this matter was probably very big and not easy to settle. Why do you ask? Last time, didn't a lot of officials be punished after the incident in Tianjin City? I'm afraid that you'll also. Li Junxing sat down at the dining table and saw the worry in Yijin's eyes. He couldn't help but laugh. Why? You're afraid that I'll lose my job. I can't afford to support you. Yijin couldn't help but glare at him again. He was already so worried, so how could he joke? Yes, I'm afraid that you won't be able to support me if you lose your job. That's troublesome. Li Junxing smiled. If I really lose my job, I can only rely on you. After all, you're the chairman now. When the time comes, I'll drive and carry your bags for you every day. How about being your assistant? Nothing much. Yijin scooped a bowl of soup and placed it in front of him. Your salary is too high. I can't afford it. Of course others can't afford it, but if it's you, you can devote your life to me. Yijin glanced at him. He was still not serious at this time. Okay. When you lose your job, you, the mayor, will be my assistant. You'll be an assistant during the day and a cowherd at night. How about that? Li Junxing reached out and pulled Yijin's hand to his side. It's night now, so do you need me to serve you now, Chairman Yi? Yijin's face blushed again. She withdrew her hand and admitted defeat. In terms of acting like a hooligan and being thick-skinned, she was definitely no match for him. She really wanted to ask, do your subordinates know that you're such a hooligan? However, she didn't have the chance to ask Li Junxing. Li Junxing answered a call, and his expression changed. Okay, I'll be right there. Uncle Li. Yijin understood the meaning behind his words and immediately stood up. Where are you going? I'm going to the factory in the West District. There was another explosion there. Li Junxing's expression was rare. He didn't expect that things would not only not calm down, but the impact would also become worse. Chapter 798. Yijin looked at his wound. He was still injured, and he wanted to run to the scene of the fire. They are here because they are here, and I am here because I am here. Li Junxing knew what she was thinking. He pinched her palm and kissed her forehead. Okay. Wait for me at home. When I'm done, I'll come back. But, don't worry, I won't let anything happen to me. As Li Junxing spoke, he leaned close to her ear and whispered, after all, I haven't tried it with you in the kitchen. Half of the worry on Yijin's face disappeared. He didn't know what kind of expression to put on after hearing his words. Li Junxing kissed her lips and turned to leave. When he opened the door, Li Junxing stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Yijin. By the way, there's already some progress on the matter you asked me to investigate last time. Don't worry. There should be results in a few days. All right. Yijin's heart tightened. He still couldn't let go of Lu Hui's death. That night, Li Junxing didn't come back again. Yijin was really worried. She got up in the middle of the night and browsed the local news twice, but she didn't see Li Junxing again. On the other side of the city, Yi Ningen was drinking wine with a gloomy face. Her face was ashen. Looking at Chen Liang, who was sitting beside her and pouring wine for her, she pushed him away. Get lost. Useless thing, you still haven't succeeded. Chen Liang was pushed by Yi Ningen. There was a trace of annoyance in his eyes, but only for a moment. Soon, he sat down again and poured wine for Yi Ningen. What are you angry about? I know you think I'm useless because I didn't kidnap your sister. But there was someone around her recently. I can't make a big deal out of it. It was true that he wanted to vent Yi Ningen's anger, but after the person who followed Yi Zhen was arrested last time, he also reacted. Yi Zhen was not someone to be trifled with. The helper that the other party found was the mayor. At that time, he was impulsive and said in front of Yi Ningen that he could deal with it, but Chen Liang felt a lingering fear after thinking about it. He had already lost 2 of his men. If 2 more came, his losses would be too great. In the end, isn't it because you're useless? Yi Ningen's tone was full of resentment. If you are useful, tie her up and kill her. I want to see how she can be arrogant. Yes, yes, yes. I'm useless. Chen Liang really liked Yi Ningen. He really didn't take her scolding words to heart. However, he said, speaking of which, her man is amazing. Without Li Junsheng, wouldn't it be very easy to deal with a woman? That's easy for you to say. He's a mayor. How are you going to deal with him? If it weren't for the fact that she couldn't touch Li Junsheng, would she be afraid of a mere Yi Zhen? Yi Ningen became angrier when she thought that Yi Zhen could hook up with Li Junsheng. However, she suddenly sat up and took out her phone to look at the latest news. The more she read, the bigger the smile on her face became. After putting down the phone, she glanced at Chen Liang. Alright, I know you couldn't do anything about what happened before, but there's a good thing for you to do right now. What? Bring down Li Junsheng. Are you crazy? That's the mayor. How? I have a brilliant idea. Yi Ningen took out her phone and showed Chen Liang the news she had just read. Look at this. Chen Liang finished reading the news, but he didn't understand. Yi Ningen smiled and leaned close to Chen Liang's ear to tell him what she thought. Chen Liang's eyes widened, and he nodded repeatedly. Wonderful, it's really wonderful. You're really smart. Of course. Yi Ningen smiled brightly, but there was a hint of viciousness in her eyes. Without Li Junsheng, let's see how Yi Zhen will rise. When Li Junsheng falls, Yi Zhen will naturally let us do whatever we want. Brilliant, really brilliant. Chen Liang smiled and pulled Yi Ningen into his arms, pressing her down. In order to celebrate our upcoming success, I'm going to celebrate. Cheers. When he said cheers, he took a sip of wine and fed it to Yi Ningen's mouth. Endless disgust flashed through Yi Ningen's heart, but she still had to use Chen Liang. She could only reach out and hook her arm around Chen Liang's neck to cater to his kiss. When Li Junsheng returned home, it was already the afternoon of the 3rd day. After 3 days of rescue, the fire in the West Side factory was finally under control. The relevant personnel of the factory were also called to investigate, and a few of the main responsible persons had been taken into custody. This matter had come to an end for the time being. When Yi Zhen heard the news that Li Junsheng had returned home, she rushed home as fast as possible. Uncle Li? When Yi Zhen returned home, Li Junsheng was changing clothes in his room. Although the office where he worked had prepared clothes for him to change into, he had basically been at the scene of the fire for the past few days. He would be dirty all over. Uncle Li, Yi Zhen quickly walked forward and placed her hands on his shoulders. She looked him up and down. Are you okay? I'm fine. Her concerned gaze made Li Junsheng very happy. He pulled her hands off his body. Didn't I tell you? I'm fine. You're still talking about it. Yi Zhen's eyes were red. I've been worried to death these past few days. Li Junsheng wasn't always free. Although he had called her to tell her that he was safe, she was afraid that he was lying to her. She only heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that he was fine. What? Are you worried that if something happens to me, you'll become a widow? You're still talking about it. Yi Zhen punched him in the chest. Li Junsheng clutched his chest and let out a low cry. Uncle Li. Are you okay? Yi Zhen was afraid that he was injured and wanted to check on him. However, Li Junsheng took the opportunity to hug her, lowered his head, and gave her a long and delicate kiss. Yi Zhen's legs went soft from his kiss, and the two of them somehow moved to the bed. Just as his hand was about to reach into her clothes, there was a knock on the door. Uncle Li, Yizhen's voice was a little hoarse. She looked at Li Junxing with a blush and gently patted his back. Get up first. Ignore it. After not seeing her for a few days, Li Junxing didn't want to let go of her at all. If there's no one, I'll naturally leave. He lowered his head and buried it in her neck to continue. Yizhen quickly pushed him away. Stop fooling around. It should be Zhaoli. When she came back just now, in order to save time, she asked Zhaoli to buy groceries for her. After kissing Li Junxing's face, Yizhen was actually a little tempted. Alright, go take a shower. I'll go cook. Take a shower and rest for a while. I'll call you when the meal is ready. Li Junxing grabbed her hand and placed it in his palm. He gently squeezed it. Next time, we can hire a nanny or order takeout. I'm not with you because I want you to cook for me. I know. Yizhen's heart was slightly touched. Of course, she knew that he didn't need her to do these things, but she wanted to do it for him. Li Junxing was indeed tired. After taking a shower, he didn't feel sleepy at all. He walked all the way to the kitchen and could already smell the fragrance of the food in the kitchen. Yizhen's cooking skills had improved a lot recently. Not only were her movements faster, but the taste had also improved. When she saw Li Junxing come out, she smiled. Sit down first. It'll be ready soon. Li Junxing didn't respond. He just leaned against the door and quietly looked at Yizhen. If he could, he would stay with her like this. Li Junxing came out of the fire scene. He rested at home for 2 days. Yizhen didn't accompany Li Junxing at home all the time. She had a lot of things to do after handing over the painting company to her. Especially in the past 2 days, she was still fighting a lawsuit with Yi Nanshan, but Yi Nanshan said that he wanted to hold a shareholders meeting again. Yizhen didn't know what Yi Nanshan wanted to do. However, she believed that Chairman Shen and the others wouldn't immediately stand on Yi Nanshan's side. Then, what was Yi Nanshan's goal? She didn't know, but she agreed. After all, it was just a shareholders meeting. She wasn't afraid of him. Before that, she talked about the 2 pending cases in the company. She fully displayed her abilities. The subordinates who had some complaints about her becoming the chairman, even Yi Nanshan's people, had no choice but to shut up and stop mentioning that her position as the chairman wasn't right. She knew that those people might still be doing it for Li Junxing's sake. If it was in the past, she would feel uncomfortable and couldn't accept it. She would want to not rely on anyone. However, one day, she really used Li Junxing's fame to achieve her goal. She was very indifferent. Firstly, she believed that the painting company itself had the ability to do so. Secondly, she had lost her mother since she was a teenager. No matter how close her grandfather and uncle were, they were still separated by a layer. For many years, she had always been alone. But now, it was different. She had Li Junxing behind her. Li Junxing's existence let her know that she also had someone to rely on and someone to like her. When she was in the mud, there would also be someone who wanted to pull her out. When she was fighting alone, there would also be someone who stood by her side and told her that he was with her. With such a premise in place, why would Yizhen care about his pride? Saturday was supposed to be a day to rest, but Yizhen woke up early in the morning. She changed her clothes and looked like she was about to go out. Li Junxing was originally reading the newspaper, but because of her movements, he focused his attention on her. Isn't it Saturday today? Do you still have to work? No. I'm going to Grandpa's house. Do you want me to go with you? Li Junxing put down the newspaper and stood up. No need. Yizhen looked at his hand that was still wrapped in bandages. Your injury hasn't healed yet. Don't run around. Rest well at home and wait for me to come back. What? You don't want me to see your parents? Yes. Yizhen turned to look at him because of his teasing voice. You haven't slept well for the past few days. You look dispirited and don't look well. I'm afraid that my grandfather and uncle won't agree to it. Li Junxing smiled. He stood up and held Yizhen's hand. There was a faint teasing look in his eyes. Don't worry. Even if I'm a little more dispirited, your grandfather won't disagree. You don't even know how much he likes me. He likes you because he thinks you're the son of a good friend. If you tell him that you want to be with his granddaughter, I think he'll beat you up. I'm so scared. Li Junxing made a scared expression. Such a fierce family. Why don't I give up? In your dreams. Yizhen raised an eyebrow at him. Let me tell you, you won't be able to get rid of me in this life. Then won't I be in trouble? You just found out? It's too late to regret it now. Yizhen blinked her quick-witted eyes and looked at him provocatively. The two of them bickered for a while before Yizhen picked up her bag and left in a hurry. Not long after she went downstairs, Li Junxing, who had already sat back down to continue reading the newspaper, heard a knock on the door. He smiled and went to open the door. You forgot to bring. When he saw the two uniformed people standing outside, the smile on his face disappeared. Mayor Li, right? One of the older prosecutors took a step forward politely. We now suspect that you have something to do with the explosion at the factory in the West District. Please come with us to assist in the investigation. Li Junxing wasn't in a hurry to move. He looked at the two people in front of him and said calmly, I have something to do with the explosion at the factory in the West District? Yes. The younger prosecutor couldn't hold it in anymore. Someone reported that you have something to do with this matter. We were only ordered to bring you back for investigation. So, Mayor Li, please cooperate and come back with us to assist in the investigation. A light flashed through Li Junxing's eyes. He suddenly smiled. Okay. No problem, I'll go with you. But can I take a coat? Yes. Thank you. Li Junxing returned to his room and sent 2 messages while he was taking his coat. He deleted the messages and left his phone at home. He put it directly on the coffee table and left with the 2 prosecutors. When Yizhen arrived at the Lu family, Lu Manjiang and Lu Zhixuan were both there. Grandpa, uncle. They sat down in the living room. The nanny of the Lu family brought out tea and snacks for Yizhen and then left the living room. Lu Manjiang looked at his granddaughter, and his eyes were filled with heartache. Jinjin, why didn't you tell Grandpa that your father wanted to ask you for shares? Grandpa, isn't everything fine now? Don't worry. My father didn't take advantage of me. Is this a matter of taking advantage of me? Lu Manjiang was furious. I really regret it now. Back then, I shouldn't have let your mother marry your father. Now, not only did I harm her, but I also harmed you, Grandpa. I already said that I'm fine. Don't think about it anymore. What happened back then was already in the past. Lu Hui was no longer here. Moreover, Lu Hui didn't expect that she would meet a scumbag like Yi Nanshan. Grandpa, you actually don't have to be anxious. Although I'm in a lawsuit with my father. But he didn't win. He still lost. Now, I'm planning to sue him. Don't worry. I won't let myself suffer a loss. You. How could Lu Manjiang not know that his granddaughter was just comforting him? It was difficult to find such a biological father in the whole country who would go to court with his biological daughter for a few shares. He was angry and hateful, but he didn't forget today's business. Forget it. I asked your uncle to call you here this time because I have something to tell you. Chapter 799. Lu Zhixuan didn't say anything until Lu Manjiang finished speaking. Then, he pushed a document in front of Yizhen. Yizhen didn't quite understand and picked up the document. Yizhen's eyes widened as he read the contents of the document. She looked at Lu Manjiang and Lu Zhixuan in disbelief. How can there be such a thing? Why would my dad sign this? That was impossible. This was completely out of character for Yi Nanshan. With Yi Nanshan's personality, How could he sign such a clause that was completely unfavorable to him? Lu Manjiang snorted, his eyes filled with coldness. Yes. If your father was in his current position, how could he be willing to sign such a clause? Yizhen stared at the document, the shock in his heart still lingering. It was an agreement between Yi Nanshan and Lu Zhen. From the date of the agreement, it could be seen that it was almost 20 years ago. The agreement stated that Jiehui Company would be established by Lu Hui and Yi Nanshan. Other than the shares needed for financing, the remaining shares would be jointly owned by the two of them. The division of shares was not the point of the agreement. The point was that it stated that Yi Nanshan and Lu Hui were husband and wife. The two of them jointly owned the company. However, if either party betrays the marriage during the marriage, the betrayer must unconditionally transfer the company's shares to the other party. Back then, I didn't agree with your mother marrying your father at all. But your mother is stubborn. All I want is to be with your father. No matter how I tried to stop her, I couldn't make her waver. In the end, I could only agree. After your mother got married, she set up a company and started a business for your father. I watched her run until she was tired. Even when she was pregnant with you, she was still running orders with clients. My heart ached for her. But I think your father is a cold-hearted person. I think he's a heartless person. Lu Manjiang couldn't hide the sadness in his voice. I know your mother's personality. If you don't see the truth, you won't believe anything. I had no choice but to find your father in private and ask him to sign this agreement at the beginning of their company's establishment. My dad agreed? How is that possible? This was not Yi Nanshan's style at all. He had no choice but to agree. Lu Manjiang still thought of Yi Nanshan's attitude at that time and felt it was ironic. Your mother was pregnant and had you. Your dad probably needs to use your mom to get more. So he agreed. What Lu Manjiang didn't mention was how Yi Nanshan swore that he would never betray Lu Hui. He said that he was sincere to Lu Hui and didn't need to sign such an agreement. But who was Lu Manjiang? He didn't trust Yi Nanshan at all. A man's behavior is done, not spoken. He was very insistent and said that if Yi Nanshan refused to sign, it would mean that he did not love Lu Hui at all. Since he did not love her, why would Lu Hui work for him? Yi Nanshan was a cunning man. In the end, he knew that he could not win against Lu Manjiang, so he could only agree. After he agreed, he did not forget to take the agreement to Lu Hui and tell her how much he loved her. Sure enough, Lu Hui was deeply moved. In the following days, she worked even harder for the company. Lu Manjiang's heart ached at the thought of his daughter's stupidity. But Yi Nanshan was Yi Zhen's biological father after all. It was better not to mention those things. Yi Zhen nodded and held the agreement, but there was still a question. Grandpa, if that's the case, why didn't you take it out when my mom passed away? I was very sad when your mom passed away. Plus, you were still young. Your mom made a will and divided the property into two, giving it to you and your dad. That was your mom's last wish. We also thought that you were his biological daughter after all. He had to take it into consideration, but who would have thought? Lu Manjiang didn't say anything else. But the aging on his face became more and more obvious. If his acquaintance in the court hadn't told him about it, he wouldn't have known that Yi Nanshan was such a beast. He was so beast that he didn't hesitate to sue his own daughter in court for some shares, for some property. What was even more outrageous was that he had the cheek to say that Lu Hui was unconscious when she died. Lu Manjiang's chest heaved violently when he thought of what Yi Nanshan had done. Seeing this, Lu Zhishuan stepped forward and patted him on the back. Dad, don't be angry. Now that Jinjin has grown up, let's give this document to Jinjin, and let Jinjin decide what to do next. In fact, with Lu Zhishuan's personality, he really wanted to kill Yi Nanshan at any time. But no matter what, he was Yi Zhen's biological father. Whether it was him or Lu Manjiang, they didn't want to put Yi Zhen in a difficult position. Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you, Uncle. Yi Zhen looked at the document. Now, no matter what Yi Nanshan did, she wasn't afraid. She really didn't care how much property she could get, but she really didn't want her mother's painstaking efforts to benefit others. Jinjin, do what you want to do. No matter what, Grandpa will support you. Okay. Thank you, Grandpa. Yijin took the document and left the Liu family. She felt that the anger that had been suppressed in her heart for a long time was finally relieved. She didn't rush home, but went to find Lawyer Tang and showed him the document. Lawyer Tang said that it was a very good breakthrough. Yi Inghan and Yi Nanshan's father-daughter relationship, and Yi Nanshan gave birth to Yi Jinhao less than half a year after marrying Chen Wan. Both of these things could be considered as an affair, and with this document in hand. If Yijin wanted to sue Yi Nanshan again, she would basically win. Since Yijin trusted Lawyer Tang, she had full authority to deal with these professional matters. After making a copy of the document for Lawyer Tang, Yijin returned home with the original. Unexpectedly, when she entered the house, she found that Li Junsheng wasn't there. The injury on his hand hadn't healed yet, and the matter of the factory in the west had come to an end. Did he go to work? This person really didn't know how to take care of his body. Didn't he know that she would worry if he worked so hard? It was useless to persuade him. Yijin thought about it and searched for some nutritious medicinal meals on the internet. She planned to wait for Li Junsheng to come back later and give him a good meal. In the end, she waited for the whole night, but Li Junsheng didn't come back. Yijin called Li Junsheng, but found that his phone was on the coffee table. Yijin suddenly had a bad premonition. She took out her phone and searched for the local news. The explosion case of the factory in the west was still under investigation. It only said that the person in charge of the factory and the relevant responsible persons were detained. Other than that, there was no other news. What exactly happened? Yizhen was so worried that she didn't sleep well the whole night. Was Li Junsheng okay? She really hoped that he didn't bring his phone and nothing else happened. Yizhen entered the company with a pair of dark circles under her eyes. As soon as she got out of the elevator, she saw Chute walking in her direction in a hurry. What's wrong? Chute stopped and looked in the direction of the chairman's office. Her expression was a little awkward. The old chairman is here. Really? Yizhen was stunned. Yi Nanshan still had time to come these few days? Shouldn't he be at home thinking of ways to get back the shares in his hands? Of course, his actions must be in vain. After all, she was someone with an agreement in hand. I got it. Thank you. Yizhen yawned. She, who hadn't slept well the whole night, was really sleepy now. Make me a cup of coffee and postpone the morning meeting for half an hour. Yes. Chute responded and left. Yizhen pulled herself together. Thinking of the document in her hands, she pushed open the office door without the slightest fear. Yi Nanshan was still sitting behind the chairman's desk. Yi Ningen and Chen Wan were still standing on either side of him. TSK. Every time Yi Nanshan appeared, there would always be a scene like this. Boring. Really boring. Yizhen's face darkened. She walked straight to the chairman's desk and stood still. Mr. Yi, this is my seat. Please move aside. What did you call me? Yi Nanshan was already angry when she called him that in court last time. Yi Nanshan looked at his daughter and really hated himself now. Why didn't he strangle this rebellious daughter to death in the past? Yizhen, you've got guts. You're actually so disobedient that you even dare to sue your father. Yizhen didn't respond. She didn't sue Yi Nanshan because she was brave, but because she wanted to buy time. Mr. Yi. You've done the first thing. Can't I do it the second time? It was really funny. He could ignore his own daughter's feelings for money, but she, as his daughter, had to care about his feelings? Unfortunately, the Qing dynasty was already over. She really didn't have the habit of being filial. Yizhen, don't be arrogant. I didn't come here today to argue with you. I can see that. Yizhen nodded. If you have something to say, say it. My time is precious. I still have a meeting later. I still have to meet a client. After all, I'm not like Mr. Yi. When you were the chairman, there were always people working for you. You just have to sit here and not move. Yizhen, what's with your attitude? Yi Nanshan was so angry that his face was red. Yi Ningen stepped forward and patted his back. Dad, don't be angry. Don't forget that we came here today to talk to my sister. Yi Nanshan's expression softened a little, but his gaze toward Yizhen was a bit more arrogant. We came today to ask you to transfer your 20% shares to me. Yizhen looked at him as if he had heard a fantasy story. What did Mr. Yi say? I said, transfer your 20% shares to me for free. Heh. Yizhen wanted to laugh. Why? I also said that I want you to transfer your shares to me. Why? Yi Ningen was the one who responded. She walked around the desk and stood in front of Yizhen. Because of Li Junsheng. Li Junsheng? Seeing Yizhen's expression flicker for a moment, Yi Ningen smiled. Our Mayor Li didn't come back yesterday, did he? Yizhen narrowed her eyes, and her gaze toward Yi Ningen suddenly became sharp. What did you do? Actually, you should ask what our Mayor Li did. Yi Ningen smiled with a hint of mockery. Yizhen had a bad feeling in her heart. Your Mayor Li is now being called to investigate. You know about the factory explosion in the West District, right? Now, there is the latest evidence that your Mayor Li is related to this matter. Impossible. Although Yizhen hadn't spent much time with Li Junsheng, she believed in him. He was definitely not a person who would do anything against the law. You really believe him. But unfortunately, you trusted the wrong person. Yi Ningen had a smile on her face, and the corners of her lips couldn't help but curl up. Your Mayor Li has indeed been taken away. Yizhen, your backer is gone. I don't know how long you can sit in the position of chairman without a backer. Yizhen didn't say anything. At this moment, her heart was filled with worry for Li Junsheng. If Li Junsheng had anything to do with the explosion, she naturally didn't believe it. Li Junsheng had only been in Qing City for a few months, and the factory in the West District had been opened for a long time. How could he have any relationship? If she really wanted to say something, she could only say that Yi Ningen was talking nonsense. If I were you, you'd be more tactful and give up the position of chairman to Dad. Of course, you have to give up the company's shares as well. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't have a good time in the future. Yi Ningen, are you done? If you're done, then leave. Yizhen, what are you so proud of? Didn't you hear what I said? Li Junsheng has already fallen. If you're smart, hand over your shares obediently and give up the position of chairman. You're so noisy. Yizhen gave her a cold look, her eyes full of mockery. What does Li Junsheng's accident have to do with me? I'm sitting in this position because the other shareholders of the company unanimously agreed. Do you want me to give up just because you want me to? Yizhen, are you out of your mind? Don't you know why those shareholders agreed? They did it for Li Junsheng's sake. Now that Li Junsheng has lost his power, do you think you can sit in this position steadily? That's my business. You don't have to worry about it. If there's nothing else, please leave. Yizhen, no matter what, you're just a junior. Your father is your elder. Aren't you afraid of retribution for opposing your father like this? Chen Wan's words made Yizhen laugh. She had watched Chen Wan's decades of hypocrisy and was really tired of it. Especially when this face might be the enemy who killed her mother, she hated it even more. Madam Chen, I suggest you don't speak. You're talking about retribution. As a mistress, I'm afraid you'll get retribution before me. You, Yizhen, Yi Nanshan, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. I advise you not to refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Old Shen and Old Zhang are just doing it for Li Junsheng's sake. You know this much better than I do. If you don't want to make things too ugly, you should obediently give up your position. It's better for you to obediently give up your position. What if I don't? Yi Zhen looked at Yi Nanshan. This was her father, her biological father. Grandpa's words really made sense. Yi Nanshan was indeed not a good person. I have evidence of Li Juanxing's corruption in my hands, Yi Ningen said coldly, her eyes full of pride. Yi Ningen said coldly at this time, and her eyes were full of pride. If you don't know what's good for you, I can only follow you and show no mercy. If you're smart, I might let Li Juanxing go. Evidence of Li Juanxing's corruption? Who would believe it? Yi Zhen's gaze swept across Yi Nanshan and the others' faces, and she suddenly smiled. Okay. You can give it a try. Hand the evidence to the prosecutor's office and see if I'm afraid. Yi Zhen, do you want to go all the way? Yi Zhen, Li Juanxing helped you so much before. Why? You're quite ruthless now. I wonder how Li Juanxing will feel if he knows you're so cold-hearted. Chen Wan deliberately provoked Yi Zhen, but Yi Zhen was unmoved. In her heart, she completely believed in Li Juanxing and his character. But looking at Yi Jinghan and Yi Nanshan, they seemed very confident. She didn't know much about officialdom. If they really played any dirty tricks, Li Juanxing wouldn't be able to guard against them. Also, a strong dragon couldn't suppress a local snake. Uncle Li was powerful, but he was still new. Could it be that what happened to Director Zhang and the others last time was really Li Juanxing's goal? She didn't want to think like that, but the current situation made her a little worried. No. Yi Zhen didn't believe it. She didn't want to believe that Li Juanxing was that kind of person. Thinking of this, she immediately regained her composure. Mr. Yi, if you're done, then hurry up and leave. I still have things to do, so I won't accompany you. Yi Zhen, I didn't expect you to be so cold-blooded. Do you really not care about Li Juanxing going to jail? Then let's talk about it after you put him in jail first. Okay, just you wait. Yi Jinghan turned to look at Yi Nanshan. Dad, since sister is so stubborn, there's no need for us to waste any more time. I want to see. After Li Juanxing really goes to jail, what else can you rely on? Yi Nanshan stood up and the group walked out. Yi Zhen believed in Li Juanxing, but she was afraid that Yi Jinghan had really prepared some dirty tricks. Just as Yi Jinghan's hand was about to touch the door handle, she suddenly spoke. Mr. Yi. Yi Jinghan had a triumphant smile on her face. She turned around and looked at Yi Zhen. What's wrong? Are you afraid? Yi Zhen didn't look at her, but at Yi Nanshan. This man had been deceiving his mother's feelings from the beginning. Grandfather and the others had never taken out the agreement back then. Thinking about it, Yi Nanshan thought that the agreement was no longer there, or that it could be invalidated and ignored. With that agreement in her hands, she could totally make Yi Nanshan scram just like that. She could take back the rest of his shares. But now that something like Li Juanxing had happened, she took a deep breath and looked at Yi Nanshan. Mr. Yi, you're doing these things just to protect your position in the general design company. But if you have nothing, will you still have a position? What do you mean? Yi Zhen didn't say anything. She took out her phone and opened her photo album. The original copy of the document was naturally at home, but she had taken a copy yesterday. It seems that Mr. Ye's memory isn't very good, so I have to remind you. Mr. Yi, you once signed an agreement in order to please my mother. I think you still remember the contents of the agreement, right? Yi Nanshan's expression changed. He looked at Yi Zhen, and his expression suddenly became a little sinister. Especially when he saw the agreement on the phone, his face turned ashen. You, Mr. Yi. During your marriage with my mother, you cheated on her several times. According to the agreement, all the property under your name will be transferred to my mother for free. If my mother is gone, then all the property will be transferred to my mother's child. Which is me. She took a deep breath and looked at Yi Nanshan's changed expression with satisfaction. It was good that he admitted it. Now, this agreement is in my hands. Mr. Yi. You still have 40% of the shares of the General Design Company under your name. But according to the agreement, these shares are all mine. Yi Zhen. Dream on. Yi Jinghan was furious. She stepped forward and wanted to snatch his phone to see clearly. Yi Zhen took a step back and didn't give Yi Jinghan a chance. She just stared at Yi Nanshan. This agreement was notarized back then. Mr. Yi, don't tell me you forgot. Of course, Yi Nanshan remembered, but after Lu Hui gave birth to Yi Zhen, they had a good relationship. He coaxed Lu Hui and asked her to destroy the agreement. He clearly saw Lu Hui destroy the agreement. Where was the original agreement now? Could it be that Lu Hui had been acting from the beginning to the end? Damn it, that damned woman. She didn't let him be happy when she was alive, and she still wanted to cause trouble for him after she died. He didn't say anything, but Yi Zhen knew what he was thinking. She took a deep breath. She didn't want to give up 40% of the shares, but in the current situation, she had no choice. Mr. Yi. Let's talk about the conditions. What? Give me all the evidence you have related to Li Junsheng. And I'll destroy this agreement. How about that? Then how do we know that you'll really destroy it? Then how do I know that you'll give me the real evidence? They didn't believe each other. Who was better than who? Yi Zhen didn't believe that people with bad characters like Yi Nanshan and the others would really hand over the evidence so readily. Yi Nanshan and Chen Wan looked at each other. Yi Jinghan spoke first. Yi Zhen, you don't have to test us here. It's useless for us to want Li Junsheng's evidence. If you don't believe me, why don't we make an appointment? We'll give you the evidence of Li Junsheng's crime, and you'll give us the agreement. How about that? That's right. Chen Wan echoed. That way, everyone can rest assured. Yi Nanshan didn't say anything. It was obvious that he tacitly agreed with Chen Wan and her daughter's suggestion. Yi Zhen pursed her lips into a straight line. After thinking for a moment, she nodded heavily. Okay, it's a deal. Tomorrow at 10:00 in the morning, you guys come to me with the evidence, and I'll bring the agreement and destroy it. Okay. Yi Jinghan was satisfied. She turned to look at Yi Nanshan. He had no objections. She originally wanted to let Yi Zhen give up all the shares in his hands, but now it seemed that she had to keep the 40% in his hands first. As for the rest, she could only plan it slowly. Anyway, as long as the agreement was destroyed, the rest would be easy to discuss. Yi Nanshan and the others left, but Yi Zhen couldn't be at peace. Did Yi Jinghan really have evidence? What kind of evidence would it be? What was the reason for Uncle Li being taken away? Uncle Li, what happened to you? Why haven't you come back yet? Chapter 800. No matter how confused Yi Zhen was, she still had to do what she had to do. Chu Tai came in and said that there was a meeting. Yi Zhen said that she understood. Before going to the meeting, she didn't forget to call Secretary Chen, but no one answered. She called Xiao Zhao again. He was only a driver, and Secretary Chen let him rest today. What could a driver like Xiao Zhao know? Secretary Chen didn't answer the phone. Was he also invited in? Yi Zhen became more and more worried. She was confident yesterday and thought that she could use the agreement to make Yi Nanshan suffer. But in the blink of an eye, Yi Nanshan set her up. She could ignore it, but she couldn't really watch anything happen to Li Junsheng. If the company's shares were lost, she could find them again and think of a way. If something happened to Li Junsheng, only now did Yi Zhen realize that in her heart, Li Junsheng was even more important than the company she had been thinking about. There was an agreement on the coffee table. Yi Zhen sat there and stared at the agreement for a long time. She called Secretary Chen again, but no one answered. She was very worried. She didn't trust Yi Nanshan and the others. She felt that if she really handed over the agreement, Yi Nanshan might not let go. But if she didn't give the agreement to Yi Nanshan, what if he really had evidence? Yi Zhen couldn't sit still and stood up. Staring at Li Juanxing's phone on the coffee table, she suddenly remembered something. The Li family couldn't ignore something happened to Li Juanxing, right? They had been busy recently, but a few days ago, Li Juanxing said that he would take her back to the Li family in Rome City for the festival. It was the Mid-Autumn Festival in a few days. Yi Zhen and Li Juanxing had already planned it, but they didn't expect something like this to happen. Thinking of this, Yi Zhen quickly picked up Li Juanxing's phone, unlocked the screen, and found the Li family's number. Fortunately, the person who answered the phone was Li Juanxing's mother. "Auntie, it's me. I'm Yi Zhen." Yi Zhen's voice was a little anxious. She didn't understand these things in the officialdom, but she was really afraid that Yi Nanshan and the others would play dirty. "Zhen Zhen. It's you? How have you been?" "Auntie. Li, something happened to Juanxing." "What?" Yi Zhen told her what had happened. Her tone was anxious. "Auntie, that's how things are now." "Look, okay, I got it. I'll tell his father." "Auntie, Zhen, don't worry too much. I trust my son's character. He won't do anything against the law. As long as he doesn't do anything wrong, no one can touch him." "All right. Auntie, I'll wait for your news." Yi Zhen hung up the phone, her eyes a little red. She looked at Li Juanxing's phone and casually flipped it open. There were very few things inside. 2 commonly used social networking apps and a payment app. There was no game, only a photo album placed in the most conspicuous position. She flipped it open and found that there were several photos of her. There were pictures of her sleeping, and another of her standing in the kitchen, cooking. There was also a photo of her walking out of the company building. When did he take it? Yi Zhen was really curious. She put down her phone and felt like crying. "Li Juanxing, I hope you're really okay." Yi Zhen had been waiting for Mother Li's call. As he waited, he actually fell asleep on the sofa. In a daze, she felt herself being picked up by someone. That familiar embrace made her unable to wake up for a moment, and she rubbed herself against his chest. When her body was placed on the bed, the different feeling made her eyes widen. "Uncle Li?" Li Juanxing, who was standing in front of her, still had the same demeanor. Other than some stubble on his chin, he looked no different from before. She was afraid that she had seen wrongly, so she couldn't help but look him up and down again. She wanted to see if he had lost a strand of hair. Was there anything wrong with his body? Yes. Li Juanxing nodded and looked at Yi Zhen, who looked like she was about to wake up. "You're awake? Uncle Li. Are you okay?" When Yi Zhen saw Li Juanxing, she instantly sobered up. She suddenly got up and threw herself into his arms, hugging him tightly. "It's really great that you're fine." "That's great." Li Juanxing enjoyed Yi Zhen throwing herself into his arms. He tightened his arms and easily hugged her body in his arms. "Yes. I'm fine." "Are you really fine? Did they do anything to you when they took you away? Have you suffered any hardships? Did you have a good rest? You definitely didn't rest well there. Hurry up and rest. By the way, the food there isn't good either. Are you hungry? I'll go cook for you." "Zhen." She said a lot in one breath. Li Juanxing didn't even have a chance to answer her. Seeing that she was about to jump out of his arms, he couldn't help but hug her waist again, not letting her leave again. "I'm fine, I'm really fine. Look at me. Aren't I fine? Look carefully." Yi Zhen finally calmed down a little. His heart was fluttering, but now it returned to its original place. "You scared me to death." Yi Zhen buried her face in his chest. She lowered her head, so he couldn't see her appearance clearly. However, he could hear the trembling in her voice. "I'm sorry, you must be scared, right? Don't worry, I'm fine. I was really scared to death by you." Yi Zhen punched him on the shoulder. "I was so afraid that something would happen to you." She couldn't continue. Her worries for the day were really enough for her. All right, all right. I'm fine. Li Junxing kissed the top of her head, lifted her chin, looked at her teary eyes, and lowered his head to kiss her forehead. I'm fine. What exactly is going on? Yizhen bit her lip. She was really worried. Do you know that my stepsister actually said that she has evidence of you taking bribes? I don't believe it at all. She's just teasing you. Li Junxing pulled her hand and squeezed it hard in his palm. How could she have evidence of me? There were so many people who wanted to find dirt on him and drag him down. People like Yi Ningen couldn't even be seen in public. I knew it. Yizhen actually believed Li Junxing in her heart, but she was too worried. You should tell me again. I have to think about how to deal with her. You don't know, but she's been too much these past 2 days. What's wrong? Does she think that she can bully you just because I've fallen from power? If Yi Ningen really had such thoughts, he really wanted to say that she was too naive. Putting aside the fact that he was reliable and never left anyone with anything to hold against him. Even in the unlikely event that he was framed and pulled down from his high horse, he would make arrangements for Yizhen before that happened. I didn't bully you. Yizhen seemed to have thought of something. She pulled his hand and led him outside. The agreement on the coffee table was still there. She showed it to Li Junxing. I only found out the day before yesterday that my dad actually signed such an agreement back then. After your accident this time, Yi Ningen thought that I'd lost my backer and wanted me to give up my position to my dad. I refused. She said that she had evidence of you taking bribes. I didn't believe it, but she made it sound so real. I was afraid that they would use some despicable trick to trick you. You've already promised my dad. Destroy this agreement and give me all the evidence he has against you. Li Junxing looked at her and immediately understood her plan. If I hadn't come back, would you really have used this to exchange? Otherwise? Yizhen bit her lip, her eyes a little aggrieved. I can't really watch you go to jail. You still said that you believed me. If you really believed me, you would know that it's impossible for anyone to use me against me. Yizhen hugged Li Junxing tightly and rubbed her face against his chest. She looked satisfied. Yes, Uncle Li, I should have believed you. Thank you for your trust. Li Junxing looked at the agreement. I think their lives are too light. You should find something for them to do. What did he mean? Leave this to Lawyer Tang. I'll ask your grandfather later. If you really want to sue, it's better for your grandfather to do it. Why? Yizhen looked puzzled. I've already talked to Lawyer Tang. Silly girl. Li Junxing pinched her face gently. No matter what, Yi Nanshan is your father. If you sue your father as a daughter, your reputation won't be good in the future. It was his idea to sue you first this time. Others will only say that he's not good. But if you go and sue him, there will always be some Dao protectors who will condemn you in both word and writing. I'm not afraid. Yizhen's expression was firm. I'm not afraid of them talking about me at all. My father did such a thing. I can't wait to sever my father-daughter relationship with him. It's just a reputation. But I don't want to. Li Junxing's expression was gentle. Jinjin, I don't want you to carry that kind of reputation. That's not necessary. Uncle Li, Yizhen seemed to understand his concerns, although she felt that there was no need for that at all. But the fact that he put himself in her shoes and thought for her still made her feel extremely touched. All right. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Li Junxing pulled her hand and sat down. From now on, trust me. I'll take care of everything. You don't have to panic. Your father has no real power other than shares. He can't do anything for a while. So, don't worry about those things for now. Just leave it to me. Okay. With him around, she was always extremely at ease. She reached out to hug him again. She only felt that hugging him like this, even if they didn't do anything, was enough to make her satisfied. However, as if she had thought of something, her gaze fell on the agreement. She looked up at Li Junsheng and suddenly smiled. Uncle Li, I still have a business deal. What? I won't tell you. Naughty. Li Junsheng went to kiss her again. Seeing that she was only dodging but unwilling to speak, he couldn't help but reach out and scratch her under her armpit a few times. Yi Zhen laughed and her body curled up into a ball. Li Junsheng didn't stop and scratched her until she almost lost her strength from laughing. In the end, she helplessly hooked her arms around his neck and softly begged for mercy. Don't come, don't come. I'll say. Yi Zhen looked at the agreement, her eyes full of slyness. Tomorrow, I'm still going to give this agreement to him. She blinked, and Li Junsheng almost instantly understood what she meant. He gently tapped the tip of her nose. You. The little girl was really smart. She used the other person's own way to counter him. Uncle Li, tomorrow, take the original copy of this agreement and continue to look for my grandfather. As for the agreement that my father wants, I will naturally give it to him. Li Junsheng looked at the light in her eyes and was tempted. He lowered his head and kissed her lips again. You're really a vixen. When Yi Zhen heard this, she reached out and hooked her arm around his neck. Yes, not only is she a vixen, but she's also a vixen who specializes in sucking your blood and eating your flesh. In that case, I can only wash myself clean and let you enjoy me. As Li Junsheng spoke, he picked her up and went to the room again. For the first time, Yi Zhen felt refreshed after being squeezed by Li Junsheng. Uncle Li was fine and had returned safely. To her, this was the best news. The next day, Li Junsheng woke up and had breakfast with her. After kissing her on the lips, he went out. When he left, he took the agreement with him. As for Yi Zhen, after finishing his meal, he picked up the other agreement and left the room. At 10 o'clock, Yi Nanshan's family of 3 arrived on time. However, they were in a neat formation, appearing together every time. Oh, except for Yi Jianhao, who was still in school. Yi Zhen didn't have the time to be polite with Yi Nanshan's family. She looked up at him with a worried expression. Did you bring the evidence you mentioned? Of course I brought it. Yi Ningen took a step forward with a document bag in her hand. She looked at Yi Zhen with an unfriendly gaze. What about you? Where's the agreement? Here. Yi Zhen waved the agreement in her hand, but she quickly retracted her hand and put the agreement behind her. How do I know that the evidence you mentioned is real? If I give it to you, you'll naturally know. Heh, what if you have a copy of me? You have to know that I only have one copy of the agreement. If I really give it to you, I won't have it anymore. As long as you hand over the agreement, we will naturally give you the evidence. This matter is a little difficult. Yi Zhen sighed and clenched the agreement in her hand. She seemed to be very conflicted and suspicious. Then what do you want? Yi Zhen bit her lip and looked conflicted. After thinking for a moment, she suddenly looked up at the 3 people in front of her. How about this, we sign a new agreement? Dad, I will give this agreement to you. After you accept this agreement, you will forever be a shareholder of the company, not the chairman. In your dreams. With so many shares in hand, Yi Nanshan's plan was to destroy the agreement and regain control of the company. If he signed another agreement, wouldn't he be in a passive position again? If that's the case, then there's nothing to talk about. Yi Zhen looked regretful. Dad, you really don't trust this daughter of yours at all. Ever since they shed all pretense of cordiality, this was the first time she called him Dad. However, it was so sarcastic and meaningful. Yi Nanshan's expression was ugly, but Yi Zhen sighed again. Dad, you really can't blame me for not trusting you. What if you take the agreement, then turn around and use the shares in your hand to deal with me? Who do I look for? Yi Zhen, don't confuse me. Yi Ningen took a step forward and stood still. The point today is not to sign another agreement, but to give us the previous agreement, and we will hand over the evidence of Li Junsheng's crime to you. Why is it that when it comes to you, you want us to sign another agreement for you? What's the reason? It was a pity that the people on the other side didn't get involved. Yijin sighed in her heart, but there was no trace of it on her face. What reason? You have the evidence, and I will give you the agreement. A one-to-one exchange. But speaking of which, 40% of the shares isn't child's play. I have to be worried that you will bite back at me in the future, right? Enough. Yi Nanshan couldn't take it anymore. You've been going around in circles for so long. Do you still want Li Juanqing's criminal record? Yes, of course I want it. Yijin seemed very hesitant as he stood up. His hand was still tightly gripping the agreement. She walked in front of Yi Ningen. Come, let's exchange together. Yi Ningen looked at her and began to become impatient. She handed over the evidence in her hand and reached out her other hand to Yijin. Yijin imitated her actions and was about to reach out her hand. However, she had just handed out the document in her hand when she suddenly retracted her hand. No. I regret it. Yi Nanshan and the other two looked at her together, their eyes filled with anger. Yijin, what do you mean? I don't mean anything. Yijin took a step back and put away the agreement in her arms. What I mean is, I don't plan to save Li Juanqing anymore. Yi Nanshan's family of 3 looked at her in disbelief. Yijin, do you know what you're saying? I know. Yijin nodded with a calm expression. Men can be relied on, and sows can climb trees. You were the one who taught me this, Dad. Back then, you could even sign such an agreement in order to coax your mother to work for you and for the company. Now, you can even sue your own daughter for the shares. Tell me, why should I trust men? With this agreement, I can snatch the entire company and make it mine. At that time, I will have money and a company. Will I be afraid of not having a man? Dad, don't you think so? Yi Nanshan was so angry that his whole body trembled. He pointed at Yijin as if he was looking at a bug. Rebellious girl, you rebellious girl. Did you do it on purpose? Dad, how can you say that? In the end, isn't this the lesson you taught me? As Yijin spoke, she hugged the document in her hand tightly. If I really listened to you and gave you the agreement. Let's not talk about whether your evidence is useful or not. Even if it's useful, it's fine. Why should I use such a huge benefit to exchange for a man? This man is your backer. Chen Wan didn't believe that she wouldn't panic. Don't you think about it? If your backer falls, who will give you face? The company will fall in your hands sooner or later. That's my business. I don't need to trouble Ms. Chen. As Yijin spoke, she took a step back again. Okay, I still have things to do. You guys can leave. Yi Nanshan's chest was still heaving violently, but Yi Ningen couldn't care less about Yi Nanshan. She looked at the document in Yijin's hand and rushed towards her without thinking, as if she was going to snatch it. However, before her hand could touch Yijin's body, it was caught. Chapter 801. Yijin was surprised to see Li Juanqing appear. He didn't even notice the word fiancé in his words. Chen Wan and Yi Nanshan heard it. Both of them were angry at Yijin for going back on his word. Naturally, no one stopped Yi Jinghan from snatching the agreement. But where did this Li Juanqing suddenly come from? Yi Jinghan's hand hurt from his grip. What shocked her even more was Li Juanqing's words just now. Fiancé? How was that possible? Are they already engaged? Yi Jinghan tried to pull her hand back, but found that the man who looked extremely elegant on the outside had a cold expression on his face. He looked gloomy and sharp. She swallowed her saliva. She was clearly very scared, but she didn't forget to insult Yijin. Mayor Li, you said she's your fiancé? When Yijin heard the word fiancé, he finally realized what it meant. When did she become his fiancé? Yi Jinghan saw Yijin's reaction and thought she was feeling guilty. She sneered. Mayor Li, you came a few minutes late. You probably didn't hear my good sister's wonderful words. Li Junxing pursed his lips into a straight line, and the strength in his hand almost crushed Yi Jing'an's wrist. What do you want to say? If you came a few minutes earlier, you would have heard that my sister is with you because of your identity. Oh. Li Junxing raised his eyebrows. What identity? Of course it's the mayor's identity. Yi Jinghan glared at Yi Zhen, wanting her to suffer. Do you know what she just said? She said that a man can be trusted and a sow can climb a tree. This means that she doesn't believe you at all. Also, Yi Jinghan pointed at Yi Zhen, and there was a flash of resentment in her eyes. Do you think she really loves you? She doesn't love you at all. She's just using you and your identity. Yi Jing'an's fingertips fell and pointed at the agreement in Yi Zhen's hand that he hadn't had time to snatch away. Do you know that we asked her to use some shares in exchange for your criminal evidence, but she refused? Are you sure you want to be with such a woman who doesn't love you? Li Junxing seemed to be stunned by Yi Jing'an's words, and the strength in his hand also relaxed a little. Yi Inghan took advantage of the victory to pursue and did not forget to continue to make things difficult for Li Junxing. You want to marry her, but she would rather choose property. Do you dare to marry such a woman? However, Li Junxing suddenly let go of his hand at this moment. With a light push, Yi Ning'an's body took a few steps back. She finally stabilized her body and looked at Li Junxing in shock. Mayor Li, Li Junxing took a few steps forward and walked in front of Yi Ning'an. Seriously speaking, Li Junxing, who was only 1.8 meters tall, wasn't particularly tall. He had the kind of figure that looked skinny in clothes and fleshy when undressed. However, he had been in a high position for many years. Even when he was smiling faintly, his aura was still very imposing. At this time, he stared at Yi Ning'an coldly. That kind of gaze made her tremble instinctively. She felt as if something was wrong. You mean, evidence of my crime? What kind of evidence is it? Yi Ning'an's face suddenly turned white. Her legs went weak and she almost fell to the ground. Say it. What kind of criminal evidence? I'm really curious. No. No. You heard wrong. Now that Yi Ning'an saw Li Junxing come out, what else didn't she understand? Now that Li Junxing appeared here, didn't it mean that he was fine? Since he was fine, then what she said just now, wasn't it? Yi Ning'an wasn't the only one who reacted to this sudden change. Yi Nanshan and Chen Wan also reacted. The two of them were so shocked that they even forgot to go forward and pull Yi Ning'an away. Uncle Li, she's right. She has evidence of you accepting bribes. Yi Zhen seemed to say very unintentionally, Uncle Li, my good sister also said that when you fall, I won't have anyone to rely on. Oh. Li Junxing raised his eyebrows lightly. I wonder how you plan to make me fall? Mayor Li, the first to react was Yi Nanshan. He took a few steps forward and walked in front of Yi Ning'an, pulling her behind him. At this time, he finally understood that Li Junxing was standing up for Yi Zhen. Mayor Li, my daughter is immature and spouting nonsense. Don't lower yourself to her level. Immature? Li Junxing chuckled. You're already an adult. Don't you know what you can say and what you can't say? Do you think you can casually say the words criminal evidence? Mayor Li, that's good. Since you think that you have evidence of my crime, then I naturally have to investigate it thoroughly to prove my innocence. Mayor Li. It's a misunderstanding. This is all a misunderstanding. I don't think this is a misunderstanding. As Li Junxing spoke, he took out his phone. It seems that I can only call Director Chen and let him deal with this matter. I really haven't asked how the crime of slander will be judged. No, Mayor Li. This is really a misunderstanding. Yi Nanshan was anxious. As he spoke, he couldn't help but glare at Yi Zhen. Damn girl, you're actually just standing there and watching. Aren't you going to help say a few good words? Chen Wan smiled and took 2 steps forward, her gaze landing on Li Juanxing's face. There was a flash of unwillingness in her eyes. Why did such a high-quality man end up benefiting that little b*tch, Yizhen? She was really too hateful. Mayor Li, my daughter is young and immature. She was tricked by someone and said a few nonsense words. How can it be considered slander and slander? To be honest, the person who seduced my daughter to say these words is the one who should be punished. Yizhen simply wanted to laugh. It had already come to this. This Chen Wan didn't forget to slander her. That was really enough. Auntie, what do you mean by that? You mean that Ningguang's words are nonsense? TSK, but I clearly heard her say that she has evidence of Uncle Li accepting bribes. Yesterday, she was still so confident and even wanted me to exchange the company's shares. How did it become nonsense now? Yizhen. Chen Wan glared at Yizhen. Her eyes seemed to be stained with poison. Why do you have to sow discord here? In fact, didn't you do it on purpose? Speaking of which, how much of your thoughts are true? But you're just using him. Mayor Li is a good person. I won't argue with you. Otherwise, how can someone like you, who values money more than life, be worthy of Mayor Li? If I don't deserve him, who does? Yi Ningguang? Yizhen smiled. She openly held the agreement in her hands and walked in front of Li Juanxing. You heard them. They said that I used you. Yes. I heard them. It was completely different from when he was facing Yi Ningguang. Li Juanxing only felt his heart warm when he saw her arrogant little face. Are you angry? I'm not angry. Why should I be angry? Did you see that? Yizhen turned to face Chen Wan. Uncle Li, he's not angry. I won't be angry with you. Li Juanxing held her waist with one hand and leaned over to kiss her cheek. You know, it's my honor to be used by you. I remember I taught you before. I said, if a person can be used, it means that this person has value. It's not worth being angry, right? Yes. I remember it all. Yizhen did it on purpose. She looked at Yi Ningguang with a provocative smile in her eyes. Uncle Li, I'm really sorry. I might still have to use you in the future. Welcome. Li Juanxing gently tapped the tip of her nose. You can use me at will. Yi Ningguang stood behind her parents and looked at the scene in front of her. She felt a fire burning in her heart. She didn't want to let it go just like that. She definitely couldn't let it go just like that. She was emotional at this moment, and no one cared. On the other hand, Chen Wan suddenly realized something when she saw the situation between Li Juanxing and Yizhen. She gave Yi Nanshan a look. She had said what she wanted to say. If Li Juanxing really wanted to deal with them, she was afraid. Yi Nanshan, who had never liked Yizhen, quickly reacted from Chen Wan's gaze. He thought of another thing. He didn't know that Li Juanxing could be so concerned about Yizhen before. Now it seemed that he had been too rash and too eager. There was no need to fall out with Yizhen at all. This way, he would still have a son-in-law who would be the mayor. When that time came, who would dare to give him a hard time? Wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted in the entire Qing city? Yi Nanshan was indeed a smart person. In the shortest time possible, he had thought of the most advantageous position for him. What was the previous agreement? As long as there was this line, he didn't care about those small problems at all. Instead, it could bring greater benefits to the company and him. It was a miscalculation. But it didn't matter. He could make up for it now. Thinking of this, Yi Nanshan quickly calmed down the emotions on his face. He changed his expression so quickly that Yizhen, who had been watching from the side, was very surprised. Mayor Li, Yi Nanshan walked forward and looked at Yizhen and Li Juanxing. I see that you and Jinjin have such a good relationship. Why don't you arrange for us to visit your father and mother sometime? It'll also be good for the elders on both sides to decide on your marriage. How about it? Engagement? Li Junsheng raised his eyebrows. I'm engaged to Jinjin. Yes. Yi Nanshan nodded. Didn't you say that she's your fiancé? But you guys don't have a name or a share now. Not many people in Qing City even know that you guys are together. How can this be? Since it's an engagement, of course, we have to meet both parents and settle this matter. Really? The corners of Li Junsheng's lips curled up. He looked at Yi Nanshan and could almost see through his thoughts at a glance. Then, Uncle Yi, do you think that you can preside over Jinjin's marriage with me as Jinjin's father? Of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't have married Jinjin to you. Heh. Li Junsheng chuckled and looked at Yi Nanshan. His expression suddenly changed. Are you worthy? You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.